That goes on for around 5 years. The cows are made pregnant every year. Terrible diseases occur because they are producing 10 times more milk than is natural. And then they are killed. The calves that are taken away, if they're male calves, are shot. And for the female calves, just like their mums, they're going to go through the same thing.
We've got Kelly Seaton here, who appears to have a cow nudging you, Kelly, behind you. That cow looks quite content with you.
The industry has worked incredibly hard. We have an excellent resource in that we can use semen, so actually the amount of bull calves that are born is a lot less than what it used to be. We're working really hard to ensure that every calf goes down the right route. So actually shooting bull calves isn't a practice that takes place any longer.
We can be kind, we should be kind.
And I'm kind to my kids by giving them cow's milk, which is full of vitamins A, magnesium, zinc, B12, calcium, vitamin D. This is stuff that children need to grow, isn't it, Kelly? And I think what my problem is, Ben, is that your commercial is all about emotion. It's manipulating. It's not facts. You're not laying out facts about the dairy industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you, as ever, live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, pro-Corbyn Member of Parliament Zara Sultana has been reported to the Parliamentary Standards Committee for posting a picture of Nigel Farage. The critics are saying is a disgrace and a clear incitement to violence. Today's question is, should Sultana get the boot, or is this simply right-wing snowflakery? And an incredible new report shows that 66% of all immigration to the United Kingdom over the past 20 years has come from the European Union. And this damning report concludes, this data proves that Tony Blair's disastrous open borders policy changed Britain forever. And a Turkish couple who pay for their 2 children, aged just 6 and 9, to be illegally shipped to Britain on a dinghy, well, they are now applying for asylum in Britain themselves. And of course, they claim the European Court of Human Rights should respect their rights to a family life, because this use of unaccompanied children opened the floodgates to yet more illegal immigration. And an unholy row has broken out after the actress Cynthia Erivo, a black woman, has been cast to play Jesus in a Hollywood play of Jesus Christ Superstar. Critics have slammed this as blasphemy and roared, "It's nothing sacred, not even Jesus Christ himself," from wokery. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show, pleasure to have your company. Take a look at this picture posted on social media by Zara Sultana, the now independent MP, who, of course, was booted out of the Labour Party, lost the whip over previous indiscretions. Get a picture on the screen. It's a picture of Nigel Farage with a line through it. Looks like, there you go. It says, mark the date. The date's there, Birmingham, the 28th of March, is Reform UK's Birmingham rally, set to be the biggest rally that they've ever held. And Zara Sultana and a bunch of protesters intend to turn up. That's the picture. Now, there's been a huge backlash from Zia Yousaf, the party chairman, from Rupert Lowe and from Lee Anderson, who are saying this is unacceptable. It's the kind of incitement to violence that a lot of people on the political left would simply say is unacceptable. Imagine if that were a picture, for example, of Zara Sultana with a line through it, or, for example, Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. They'd be taken to their fainting couches. They'd be calling it Islamophobia of the highest order. Or is it just a piece of paper? Is this right-wingers being snowflakes? Let us know your thoughts the usual way. Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you at 3 minutes past 3. We start with news from Russia. Vladimir Putin says his nation is ready to return to negotiations over the war in Ukraine, calling a resolution a priority. He also told state media he was pleased with yesterday's talks between the US and Russian officials. Those were taking place in Saudi Arabia. And Putin also says energy discussions are needed between leaders of Russia, the US and Saudi Arabia. We will keep across details on those talks for you throughout this evening. Well, meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky says Donald Trump is trapped in a disinformation bubble after the US president claimed Ukraine could have ended the war very easily. Take a listen.
This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
Well, the Ukrainian leader dismissed Russian claims repeated by Trump that his approval rating is just 4%. Zelensky also rejected US demands for the return of $500 billion in minerals, calling it not a serious conversation to be had. Trump has hinted that an election in Ukraine may be needed for peace. Well, as talks between Russia and the US continued yesterday without the rest of the world at the table, the French president is now hosting European leaders for a second meeting on Ukraine's war effort this afternoon. Around 15 countries are expected to join 2 days after an emergency Ukraine summit, where leaders pledged more defence spending and agreed that Kyiv must have a say in its future. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is also set to host another meeting soon after talks with US President Donald Trump in Washington. In other news this hour, UK inflation has jumped to 3%. That is the fastest rise in 10 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. And with energy, water and council tax bills also set to rise in April, households are bracing for more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could push prices up even further. The government is warning that the road to low inflation will be bumpy, but political parties are still trading blame over tax and spending policies. Here's the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride.
Unexpectedly large rise that is going to impact families right up and down the country. But look, this has happened because of choices this government has made. It's gone out and spent a lot of money, borrowed a lot of money. That's been inflationary. It has also neglected productivity when it cut those public sector wage deals. There were no productivity requirements attached to that. And of course, the national insurance increases for employers will in part at least be passed on and is being passed on by way of higher prices. So those are decisions that this government took, and they were the wrong decisions.
Retailers selling knives online will face stricter laws as a review finds it's easier for children to buy blades than paracetamol. New rules mean tougher prison sentences for selling knives to under 18s and a legal duty for retailers to report bulk or suspicious purchases. The crackdown follows tragedies linked to unlicensed knife sales as the government is vowing to protect young people from knife crime. Jonathan Reynolds is facing accusations of fabricating his CV after repeatedly describing himself as a solicitor, despite never qualifying. The business secretary told MPs he worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre before becoming an MP in 2010. In reality, he quit his training contract before qualifying to run for Parliament. While the Shadow Housing Secretary, Kevin Hollinrake, has called on Jonathan Reynolds to come to Parliament and explain himself.
You cannot fabricate your CV, and we've seen this, of course, with Rachel Reeves, who's had to make several alterations to her CV, and now it seems Johnny Reynolds as well. So I think having done that in Parliament, you're duty bound to come to Parliament to actually put the record straight.
Meanwhile, Labour says it's a complete muddying of the water. They say LinkedIn, where that CV was posted, is not, in fact, a CV. Rather, it's a social media profile, and that the profile itself is a human error from his office. They also add that in regard to the 2014 parliamentary speech, they say that Kevin Hollinrake, Jonathan Reynolds, I should say, wasn't discussing his professional background. The BBC is under fire over claims it aired Hamas propaganda in a new Gaza documentary. It's accused of featuring a child narrator called Abdullah, without disclosing he's the son of a Hamas minister and grandson of a founding member. The programme, Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, aired on Monday, showing the conflict through the eyes of 3 children, and critics say it raises serious questions about bias. And just before I hand you back to Martin in Westminster, an update from the Vatican on Pope Francis. He is still in hospital with bilateral pneumonia, but spent a peaceful night and ate breakfast this morning, they say. The 87-year-old has long been battling a respiratory infection and was admitted on Friday. His weekend engagements have now been cancelled, with tests showing what officials called a complex picture of his condition. But the Pope is said to be in good spirits. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for a look at the top stories in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
What's the show? Now, the former Labour MP and now an independent, Zara Sultana, has been reported to the Speaker. She's been labelled a disgrace after asking her followers to save the date in this social media post. As you can see there, there's a line through the middle of Nigel Farage, a caricature of the Reform UK leader. Of course, it's the 28th of March, the same day of Reform's major rally in Birmingham. But I want to ask, would there be uproar if Nigel Farage tweeted a picture the same way of Zara Sultana asking to save the date? Is this unfairly targeting the Reform UK leader and putting his safety at risk? Or is this just the right wing being, well, snowflakes? Well, let's get the opinions now of our political editor, Chris Hope, who's in the studio. And also I'm joined by Nigel Nelson, GB News' political correspondent, for his take on matters. Chris, let's start with you. Social media spats of 10 a penny. This one, however, is a bit different. It's been taken very, very seriously. There's been a huge backlash, both from Reform parliamentarians and the broader public, because many feel that this is an incitement to target Nigel Farage. Tell us more.
And that's the worry. And when an MP does it to another MP, it's kind of worse if that's what the thinking behind it is. We don't know, because Zara Sultana won't respond to my phone calls or my emails this lunchtime about what she meant by that tweet. But let's have a look at it again on the screen there. No Farage in Birmingham, it says, on that date in March, the 28th of March at the bottom there, which is a date of a big rally that Reform UK is holding in Birmingham. Now, I've spoken to senior figures in Reform UK. Lee Anderson is the party's chief whip. His job is in charge of the 5 MPs who are Reform UK MPs. Unofficially, this has been referred now to the Speaker of the House of Commons. He, I understand, has passed the issue on to Commons Security, because they take the security of MPs very, very seriously. It will be raised at a meeting of MPs next week when the Speaker's Committee on Security meets. The appropriate action has been taken, I've been told, by Reform UK. Friends of Anderson tell me that there were some ugly scenes, and I was there for them, at that rally in Leicester, when there were around 100 or so, I think they were pro-Palestinian demonstrators outside, spitting, jostling, people entering the theatre where that Reform UK event was being held. Zia Youssef, the party chairman, he says this is a disgraceful tweet to make against a fellow MP, and that's the point, MP on MP, who requires round-the-clock protection due to credible threats to his life. That's the chairman of Reform about Nigel Farage. If Keir Starmer had any standards, he would sack you. Of course, in this instance, Zara Sultana has not been a Labour MP since last July, when she broke the whip and voted for a 2-child benefit cap. As I say, Zara Sultana, the MP for Coventry South, since 2019, is available right now for comment, but we're trying all afternoon. OK, Nigel Nelson, let's bring you in at this point. The fact of the matter is, Nigel Farage, is a security risk. Zia Youssef has pointed that out. He's had milkshakes thrown at him, he's been jostled, he's had lumps of stuff thrown at him. There's never been a custodial sentence, and there has been custodial sentences, for example, when Jeremy Corbyn was egged. So there's a whole conversation about 2-tier policing, but this is a parliamentarian on a parliamentarian. They really, really should know better, should they not? Or is it just a piece of paper? Is it just a protest and the right wing should really get over themselves?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that it is just a piece of paper. First of all, an MP's security is incredibly serious. What happened to Joe Cox and what happened to David Amess must never happen again. So it's absolutely right that Parliament takes the security of MPs hugely seriously, and they have a lot of things in place to actually ensure that. this seems to be in a completely different area. What that symbol is a kind of no symbol. It just says Nigel Farage isn't welcome in Birmingham. The save the date, I would interpret it as you do, although it doesn't say it, is to encourage people to come outside and protest. There's no threat of violence in this at all.
Well, how do you know that? How do you know that somebody looking at that might interpret that in a different way? And is that not the point? Some idiot on social media might post this, but this is the parliamentarian. They should be held to higher standards, surely.
Yeah, but I mean, how somebody else interprets it, that's a matter for them. I mean, what
also
this
don't post it.
Well, this is a traditional symbol. It's a symbol that's been used for years, which simply says, look, you're not welcome.
How do you think Zara Sultana would react if that picture was a picture of her? Or, say, for example, Sadiq Khan. You know full well, Nigel, she'd take to a fainting couch, she'd be calling it Islamophobic, she'd be calling it racist, she'd be calling it targeted harassment, she'd be calling it an incitement to violence, she'd be calling it all of the things that her critics are saying about her today. And isn't that the point?
Well,
this is about the hypocrisy of the left.
I don't think she would. And certainly Zara Sultana, because of her support for Palestinians in Gaza, has had plenty of threats herself. So, I mean, she knows what it's like to get them. So, no, I don't think she'll be bothered about that. And I don't think Nigel Farage should be terribly bothered about this particular image either. It is not threatening. There's nothing in there that suggests that any kind of violence is going to take place.
But Zia Youssef has pointed out that there is a security risk to Mr Farage, and how can this be helped? And I put it to you again, this is not some random on social media, it's a fellow Member of Parliament. Should they really be doing this?
When it's something, I mean, they insult each other all the time. And if you like, this is a straightforward insult. She doesn't want Nigel Farage or the rally in Birmingham to take place at Birmingham Arena. No, I know, but that's all she's saying. I mean, that's a politician on the opposite side of the political divide saying just that. She's not saying anything that would pose a threat to Nigel Farage over and above the threats he already faces.
OK, well, that one will rage and rage. Chris Hope, elsewhere. Seems to be some dodgy chicanery around CVs again in the Labour Party. Not Rachel Reeves this time. She'll be breathing a sigh of relief. It's not about her, no doubt. This time it's Jonathan Reynolds. What's the latest here?
That's right. So Rachel Reeves, Chancellor, she reset her LinkedIn CV, the CV looked at by all employers if you want to get a job in kind of office work. November last year, that's when she said she was an economist for the Bank of Scotland. No, she wasn't. And then we see last week when she may have exaggerated slightly her time at the Bank of England. Nearly doubled it from 5.5 years, which is the truth of it, to nearly 10 years, as in previous speeches. Now, Jonathan Reynolds, he's the business secretary. He talks for business in Cabinet. He has been said before that he was a solicitor. He's told that in the House of Commons in 2014. There may be a clip. Here he is now. If you can hear the economy saying there, but he was saying there that he worked as a solicitor in Manchester City Centre before switching careers. So he has been said before in the Commons, not from the dispatch box when he was backbench in 2014, that he was actually a solicitor. In fact, he was a trainee solicitor. This is a big difference. If you're a solicitor, you are one. If you're not one, you're not one. And these things are regulated. So don't get that wrong.
I once played for England, actually, I didn't. I once played for my local...
Yes, you live in England, yes.
Yeah.
2011, he said, personally, he found being an MP better for work-life balance than being a solicitor and a councillor. So he said it there, and he's now reset his LinkedIn page to say trainee solicitor. He's blamed, sources close to him say it was a third party written by somebody else from his office. I see a problem here. Rachel Reeves blaming her team, Jonathan Reynolds blaming his team. I think these politicians are leaders. They should own up to mistakes made by their office and say it's on me. They're not saying that. They're blaming somebody else. I find that difficult. But as we know from Jonathan Reynolds, he says it's made by a third party. It's a mistake to say it in the House of Commons.
All right.
And there we go.
I think we've got the clip. We can have a look at this now. Let's have a little butchers.
Before the last election, I worked as a solicitor in Manchester City Centre, and I would travel in to Manchester every day from what is now my constituency.
There we go, Nigel Nelson. When is a solicitor not a solicitor? That's not a bad Christmas joke. It happened in Parliament there. Jonathan Reynolds, you know, being liberal with the truth. Well, put a bit of pixie dust on his CV. Seems to be a common occurrence in the Labour Party top brass.
He shouldn't have said it. And I think that politicians need to be truthful, and especially when it comes to their past, they should be accurate about it. So no, he shouldn't have said it. I don't like the idea of blaming your own team for the mistake. What I think you should do is apologise for it. I don't think it's a resigning offence or anything like that. It's a minor thing, but it's still, the public have a right to believe their politicians will be truthful. If you tell a lie in Parliament, that's enough to get you thrown out of Parliament. So Parliament actually takes it quite seriously, and once they get there, they're very careful to bend the truth a bit, but not to actually lie.
Can't wait to see Angela Rayner's CV, first woman on the moon.
Exactly.
Once scored a diving header at Wembley.
I've just got some statement here from the Reynolds team. They're saying the LinkedIn profile was a human error from his office. Friends say that he has said elsewhere.
How could it be a human error when he said it himself?
And a trainee sister. I know, but he's confused also in other writings. His old contingency website written by a third person. He's a bit of a mess. They are saying, though, that it was a mistake in 2014 to say in the House of Commons. That's the most serious offence to make for an MP, to say something wrong in the House of Commons. If you step back, though, he's dealing with business people who deal with CVs and HR every day. For a CV to be wrong is embarrassing, and that'll be felt by the community he works in business.
OK, this one will run and run. Thank you very much, Chris. And Nigel. Moving on now, a police watchdog has found that the police inadequately investigated an assault on a warehouse workers by Valdo Calacane, potentially preventing his subsequent murder spree a month later. The investigating officer neglected to check Calacane's details on the police national computer, which could have revealed his past and flagged him as a threat. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, yet another indignity suffered by the families of the deceased. How many chances were missed to get this fella banged to rights? And here we go again, another massive, massive insult.
Yes, there's no doubt this is a real kick in the guts once again for the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates, who've had to listen to so much in the way of failings from the NHS, from local authorities, police in Nottingham, and now this neighbouring force of Leicestershire, where an incident took place on the 5th of May 2023. This was just over a month from the fatal attacks that took place in Nottingham. On that particular incident on the 5th of May, it was a warehouse in Kegworth in Leicestershire. Police called a 999 call to reports that staff in the warehouse had been attacked by Valdo Calacane, but they took 18 minutes to arrive. Their standard response time should be under 15 minutes. When they arrived, Valdo Calacane had already been escorted from the premises. But really, the investigation that was supposed to have taken place was woeful, to say the very least. Those that were attacked, the two victims, Romanian, were not really interviewed in any meaningful way. One of them couldn't speak English. The other one only had a smattering of English. Witnesses were never spoken to properly. The CCTV that they obtained of the incident, in which one of the victims was pushed over, another was punched in the face, was never kept. One of the two attending officers said that they'd recorded it on their body-worn camera, but the other officer believed that they'd recorded it on their body-worn camera. Either way, it never appeared, it was never kept, and that evidence was eventually wiped. They got Valdo Calacane's name wrong to begin with, before eventually getting a correction and his proper name through a few weeks later. This was still, incidentally, before the attacks in Nottingham. And had they at any point, with the correct name, entered that into the police national computer database, they would have found that Valdo Calacane was wanted. A warrant had been issued for his arrest for an assault of headbutting and punching a police officer in a serious assault in Nottingham in 2022. They would have also seen 6 other offences that were listed against him, including harassment and assault and stalking of neighbours and flatmates in Nottingham, they would have also seen that this was a man who had suffered severe mental health issues and had been sectioned on a number of occasions. It would have told them, Martin, that this was a very dangerous individual, clearly spiralling back towards being very violent and dangerous to the public. And as a result of knowing that information, then perhaps he could have been arrested, maybe committed again, and not in a position to carry out the horrific crimes that he did just a month or so later.
Mark White, it's a shocking tale of serial ineptitude, multiple failings by multiple agencies, and I guess the one crumb of comfort for those three families is that there is now a full inquiry going on with judicial powers to call anybody to account, perhaps including these people who missed it all the way through. Thank you very much, Mark White, for joining us. Yeah?
Well, we want to say the inquiry hasn't started yet. We're waiting to see it's been announced but not started yet.
Yeah, OK, thank you very much. OK, now 2 children across the channel alone and their parents could now be granted asylum. More cases of the lunatics taking over the asylum, and that's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives. Again, down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:27 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. 2 children crossed the Channel alone, and now their parents could also be granted asylum. Yes, 2 parents allegedly allowed their young kids, aged just 6 and 9, to cross one of the most dangerous shipping routes in the world. They paid a people smuggler to get their kids on board this dinghy, but now lawyers are claiming the couple were forcibly pulled off the dinghy by other migrants. If you believe that story, and the UK should grant them asylum so they can be reunited with their children in Britain. They're a Turkish-Kurdish family. They're currently in France and they want to come to Britain because guess what? They feel their human rights are being breached. Well, the Home Office are reportedly hesitant as they worry it would set a dangerous precedent. Somebody else who has the same worry is the research director at the Centre for Migration Studies, and that is Rob Bates. Rob, welcome to the show. What can I say about this? You know, we've had Nigerians not being sent back because they joined a terror organisation. We have Cubans marrying dead people. Now we've got children coming to the country. Their parents claim to have been on the boat. We don't know if that's true or not. And this could be a terrible, terrible tidal wave coming through if this sets a precedent.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we need to recognise the people organising these crossings are incredibly shrewd individuals when it comes to working out where the loopholes exist with the current asylum and immigration system. We've obviously had other cases where people have claimed to be homosexual or Christian or children when they're blatantly not children. So I think we need to really recognise that this is what these kind of instances are. They're test cases. They're people trying to kind of push the boat and wheedle away at what is potentially a huge chink in the armour. I don't believe that the parents were kind of pulled off the boat, to be perfectly honest. I think that's probably part of the ploy of this. I think that this is a very straightforward case if you were to approach it from common sense. Yeah. The parents shouldn't be allowed to enter, that's straightforward, and then the children should be sent back and returned to the parents in France, which is a safe country, because you're absolutely right, and the Home Office is right, that a worrying precedent does get set if we start allowing parents to be reconciled with children that are in the UK. We have thousands of unaccompanied asylum seekers that are children in this country at the moment, and if they were to get wind of this, if the networks to get wind of this being a legitimate way to reconcile families, then we could see huge numbers of people making similar appeals.
That's exactly the point. And the Home Office is resisting. They're saying they're hesitant. Well, good. Trouble is, they can't deport Pakistani rapists. They can't deport known terrorists. If they're not deporting murderers back to Jamaica, what chance have they got of deporting children? I just think that the same problems will await the Labour government as faced Rishi Sunak's government. It's the same lawyers using the same loopholes, using the same European Court of Human Rights right to a family life. Article 8, Article 3. Article 3 prohibits the torture, inhuman treatment and degrading punishment. They're actually saying if their children are sent back, they will face degrading punishment. And they're facing degrading punishment in France, which they entered of their own volition. And they paid to try and get to England, and now they expect the taxpayer to get them to Britain and support their lifestyle. And I put it to you, Rob Bates, they'll probably succeed.
I think you probably are right. I think despite its protestations, the Home Office is effectively very neutered when it comes to dealing with these kind of claims brought under the Human Rights Act and the ECHR, because unfortunately, as we seem to be seeing again and again and again now, our immigration policy isn't really in the hands of the Home Office. It's increasingly in the hands of these activist judges appointed by a quango and often with backgrounds from left-wing law firms. So I think we can't really get serious about addressing all of these loopholes, any of these loopholes, including this one, until we start having a serious discussion about the judicial role in this crisis, the role of activist judges, and I really think we need to get to a point where the immigration tribunals need a complete overhaul, the judges need to be turfed out, and we need to start thinking about putting the power back in the Home Office, where at least there's some semblance of accountability of an elected politician making calls.
Is there the political will to do that? I mean, for example, in Germany right now, they're deporting Afghans to the Taliban. They're in the European Court of Human Rights. They're in the European Union, for God's sake. But they have a tougher stance on this because they seem to have the political will. Do the Labour Party have the political will? Does the Home Office have the political will? There's a lot of talk about the Home Office not really being, how should you put it, fully invested in being robust about our border control.
Yeah, there's the odd protestation from the Home Office. I think, unfortunately, in the UK, unlike in Germany, where, obviously, as we'll see later this week, the elections and the pressure from the right in politics over there, we have two, effectively, people heading up our approach to these kind of legal issues, and that's Keir Starmer and Hermer, the Attorney General, and both of them are coming from backgrounds deeply seated in this kind of left-wing human rights law firm. And Keir Starmer takes such pride from the proclamations that Britain will never shirk its obligations to human rights. It's a proud defender of the ECHR and, you know, standing by the rules-based international order. And I think, unfortunately, these people are almost hardwired to accept these kind of decisions or to kind of recognise the authority that these legal processes do have, whereas in reality, sovereignty in this country rests with Parliament. And if we were to have a Parliament with politicians and a government with politicians that actually recognise what needed to be done and to take a scythe to the whole lot of it, then I think we'd be actually able to make some progress.
Is that likely to happen? I think you're absolutely right. We seem to be in this double bind at the moment. We have a party talking tough on immigration. They have to, because they're facing a huge, perilous wipeout in the Red Wall and in Wales. They're looking, we saw yesterday, at losing over 240 seats at the next election if they carry on with this track. And yet the Labour Party, as the Tory party before them on Brexit, seem like two parties within one, talking tough on something but not actually wanting to get it done. That's a double bind. Rob Bates, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for coming in to see us at GB News today. Now, the BBC is being accused of being a mouthpiece for Hamas. Again, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. But first, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you. Just after 3:30, the top story this hour. Vladimir Putin says Russia is ready to return to negotiations over the war in Ukraine. He says a resolution is a priority. He's also told state media he was pleased with yesterday's talks between the US and Russian officials taking place in Saudi Arabia. And he also says energy discussions are needed between leaders of Russia, the United States and Saudi Arabia. Well, that comes as Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Donald Trump of spreading disinformation after the former US president appeared to blame Ukraine for starting the war with Russia. In a speech, Mr. Trump said Kyiv should have never started it and could have made a deal.
This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
Well, Zelensky hit back today, saying Donald Trump is living in a disinformation bubble and dismissed Russian claims repeated by Trump that his approval rating is just 4%. Zelensky also rejected US demands for the return of $500 billion in minerals, calling it not a serious conversation. Trump, though, has hinted that an election in Ukraine may be needed for peace. Pope Francis is in hospital with bilateral pneumonia, but has spent a peaceful night there and ate breakfast this morning, according to the Vatican. The 87-year-old has been battling a respiratory infection for more than a week now and was admitted on Friday. His weekend engagements have been cancelled, with tests showing what officials have called a complex picture of his condition. But the Pope is said to be in good spirits. In other news, a British journalist has been reported missing in Brazil, with calls for authorities there to step up the search for her. Charlotte Peat last contacted a friend on the 8th of February from Sao Paulo before planning to travel to Rio, but hasn't been heard from since. The 32-year-old's family has given police her passport and flight details, while Brazil's homicide department is now assisting the investigation. The Press Association has urged an urgent search as concern grows among foreign journalists. The UK Foreign Office also said it is supporting Charlotte's family and is in contact with local authorities. And brighter news and hopefully some brighter skies. The UK's cold and grey spell is finally coming to an end, with much milder weather on the way. By the end of this week, temperatures will be above average across the country and warmer than Greece, which is in the grip of an unusual cold snap. Some eastern areas could see highs of 16 degrees on Friday. That's a big jump from the usual 9 degrees for this time of the month. But with low pressure taking over, unsettled conditions are set to follow, bringing wind and rain potentially. The UK's first named storm of the month. Lucky us. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Manchester, the M62 eastbound is partly blocked by a broken down lorry between junction 21 at Milne Row and junction 22 for Rishworth Moor. In Nottinghamshire, in Nottingham, Mansfield Road, the A60, that's been closed southbound for a police investigation between Union Road and Shakespeare Street, the A6008. In Leicestershire, the A42 southbound is partly blocked by a vehicle on fire, and that's just by the exit to junction 13 for Colville and the A511. In Hertfordshire, the M25 is queuing clockwise in the roadworks between junction 22 at St Albans and 23 for the A1M.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
A new study has found that almost 8 in 10 of Gen Z Brits believe that the romantic poems of Shakespeare, Keats, Barrett Browning and the rest are outdated and irrelevant. Can we re-engage youngsters with such verse? Can the Gen Z audience become infatuated with love poetry? Joining me now is the Professor and Chair of English at the University of Virginia, Andrew Stauffer. Andrew, welcome to GB News. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
What is it that a poet does with language and in love, with language and with love, to express love better than any other way in which it can be expressed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is, it's relying on language as being the primary way that we get in touch with our feelings, that, poetry is the language art par excellence. And so it's the assumption that the more we can use our words to talk about our feelings, the deeper, more pleasurable, more available those feelings actually are to us. And so in a certain way, reading poetry, not only we recognize our feelings, we even catch feelings from art, from poems, from songs, from stories. There's a way that even our own most personal relationships are structured by the culture that we have grown up in and that we've been immersed in. And so it really can be an aid, or at least a transformative experience to encounter language, to give yourself words for your own very private feelings that turns out have been felt by other people going all the way back to Sappho and Catullus and Horace and through Shakespeare and through the whole English tradition. So that can be galvanizing as well, really kind of eye-opening to know that you're not alone in your feelings.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:39 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the BBC is being accused of being a mouthpiece for Hamas again. Its Gaza How to Survive a War Zone documentary featured a child living on the Strip. But it turns out that the child is reportedly the son of a top Hamas official. And it's an astonishing story about BBC bias once again. And joining us now to discuss this is a journalist, Nicole Lambert. Nicole, welcome to the show. So this purported to be a touching insight into the trials and tribulations of those faced in Gaza. It turns out actually one of the children was related to somebody from Hamas. You couldn't make it up.
He's not only the son of somebody who has quite an important role in Hamas today, but his grandfather is also one of the founders of Hamas. So he is apparently Hamas royalty. And one of the big questions is, was this boy paid for his work? He was the narrator of the documentary. Because if he was, that means that British taxpayers, licence fee payers' money is going into the pockets of Hamas royalty.
So how did this not get picked up in basic vetting? I mean, I've worked on TV shows before, I've presented TV shows before, I've compiled TV shows before. A basic part of vetting of anybody who's a guest, a contributor, let alone front of camera like this, you'd look into their background to find out who they are. How did they miss it?
Well, that is the big question. And in fact, a letter has just been released just within the last few minutes. I'm a signatory to it, asking this question. Obviously, this is a child, so there's extra duty of care. It means that his parents were involved. So did the producers of this documentary, did they know who the parents were? Did they have any idea what they did? And if they, and how could they not know? Because the parents had to be involved. So there are many different questions. For example, also, what about the other children involved? What sort of vetting was happening? And the BBC has tried to back this off by just saying all the usual policies have been adhered to, blah, blah, blah. But it's not good enough, because I think we really need to know, don't we?
And, you know, there have been repeated failings from the BBC, criticisms, there have been complaints upheld against them since the beginning, after October the 7th, when Hamas, the terrorist organisation, committed that pogrom and invaded. This really can't help. I mean, it makes you ask the bigger question, do they care? Or do they seem to have some kind of political leaning towards one end of the spectrum of this conflict?
From where I'm standing I'm an entertainment journalist, I'm also a Jewish journalist, it feels like they are very much on the side against Israel. And although they have good people that work for them and write for them and are on TV for them, there's just a kind of leaning, you know, there is a kind of political persuasion that is pro-Palestinian, and there's very little nuance here. So therefore they completely adhere to the Hamas line. And Hamas, I don't need to remind your viewers, is a prescribed terrorist group. But what we see on the BBC is at its very best, it's trying to maintain a neutral line. But in this case, it's a neutral line between a democratic state, Israel, and a terrorist group, which, as we know, is holding many civilian hostages, including 2 babies.
So, Nicole, if I may inquire, the letter you've written to the BBC, what kind of other people have signed it, and what kind of questions are you asking them?
So Danny Cohen, who's a former BBC boss, is on there. Leo Pearlman, who's a top producer, who produced Gavin and Stacey. There's lots of people that work for or with the BBC, like me. And there's just questions about the duty of care. What did they know? Were there payments? How did they look after this child and the other children that are in it? For example, one of the children said something that is anti-Hamas. So therefore, are they being protected? And if they knew that there was this Hamas link, why were the people watching this show not told about it? But it kind of leads to the wider question, which is the fact that everything that comes out of Gaza is Hamas propaganda, because everything that comes out is done by people who have been approved by Hamas, because there is no free journalism there. So is it something that that all of our TV companies should have said from the start, that this material is all censored by Hamas?
And Nicole, there have been so many questions asked about the veracity, the dependability of stats and data that have come out from ostensibly Hamas since the very beginning. But the notion that a child could be used as some kind of, I don't know, mannequin, some pawn in a political game, getting on a mainstream TV channel, a globally recognised brand, paid for by taxpayers, and ostensibly spouting Hamas propaganda is bordering on the grotesque.
It is grotesque, but, you know, children have been used throughout this war. I think what's quite interesting, and there was an interview with somebody who did work for Hamas. They showed 2 pictures. So to the Arab world, they show a picture of Hamas strength, that they are winning this war against Israel. And to the Western media, they show images that tear at the heartstrings, and they always do. So if you see images that are particularly on the BBC that come out of Gaza, they're of dead children, there are children crying, and even in the most grotesque spectacle, there was a child in a hospital looking at the dead body of his aunt or uncle. The kind of thing that you would never do to a child in Britain. And the way that children are used in this manner, it forms part of not just the anti-Israel telling of this story, but it goes into deeper stories of anti-Semitism and the idea that Jews like to kill children.
OK, Nicole Lambert, thank you very much for coming on the show, sharing your tale. Please let us know how that letter goes on. If you get a response, I'd love to speak to you again on this topic. Thank you, Nicole Lambert. Now, a BBC spokesman has said this to GB News. The documentary was produced in line with our editorial guidelines, and the BBC had full editorial control. It was edited and directed from London, as independent international journalists are not allowed into Gaza. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, and who can blame you, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Winds
from the north will bring a real chill to Greece and Turkey over the next few days. Meanwhile, plenty of sunny skies in Spain. There's that northerly wind making many of the Greek islands colder than the UK. Certainly chillier across parts of Croatia. Some sunny spells in Italy, along with a few showers. Fine and sunny weather for the Balearics and southern Spain, along with the Canaries. And the breeze here will be easing. But that cold wind will continue to blow across the Greek islands into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather has changed. It's turning milder, but it's also turning quite blustery. The wind's going to get stronger over the next few days. We'll all see further spells of rain, all thanks to low pressure systems and weather fronts. Look at them all lining up out in the Atlantic, finally pushing away the high pressure that's brought most of us a pretty dry February so far. But it's going to be far from dry tonight. Patchy rain here and there, but many eastern areas dry this evening. But look at that rain spreading its way in. Some of that rain on the heavy side too. A lot of cloud around and the wind's continuing to strengthen. Quite chilly this evening across parts of the east, but these are the temperatures by morning, 7 or 8 degrees above freezing in some parts of the south and the west. Start Thursday in double digits, but also start pretty drab, fairly blustery with further outbreaks of rain to come. It's going to be a grey day across much of Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy across the north initially, but further pulses of heavier rain coming into the southwest and a pretty wet start for Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain here for the morning rush hour. Outbreaks of rain too across Wales and southwest England. Parts of eastern England having a dry start, but again, don't expect it to last. The breeze continuing to strengthen, getting really quite windy in western areas as this next band of rain works in across northern England, North Wales, covering Scotland. Should turn a bit brighter in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland for a time, but then more showers come in during the afternoon. Wales, southwest England, northwest England also looking a bit brighter to end the day. We're all looking milder. Look at the temperatures. Double digits across the board. Some places getting into the teens. We might even squeak up to 15 or even 16 Celsius. Still a few heavy showers around across northeast England and Scotland on Thursday evening, but many places becoming dry for a time. But behind me, there's more wet weather moving in, and that means further spells of wet weather for Friday and through the weekend. Also looking pretty gusty at times as well.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News, 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 10 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, the home of British racing is gearing up for a major celebration today. It's 75 years of Formula One, and the sensational Silverstone circuit has been at the centre of the sport since the very beginning. Well, last night, Formula One celebrated their anniversary by holding a special launch event at the O2 Arena in London. All 10 teams released their liveries and showcased their driver lineups, including 7-time F1 champion, as you can see on your screens there, Lewis Hamilton, who will drive for Ferrari this season, looking resplendent in red. Well, to mark the occasion, our reporter Jack Carson has been at the home of British racing.
Well, we are here at the Silverstone Museum today celebrating British motor racing. 75 years this year since the first Formula One race was held here at Silverstone, and we can see one of the cars which competed, this beautiful Niki Lauda BRM. We're joined with Rob Janer, who's the head of learning and engagement at the Silverstone Museum. I mean, Rob, tell us about this car. It is a thing of beauty.
It is, and I love the expanse of these 1970s cars. It really does look quite imposing here at the museum. BRM at this period of time were kind of of almost Britain's Ferrari, if you like. They manufactured not only the chassis, but also the engine as well. And they were world champions back in 1962. BRM won the Formula One Drivers' World Championship with Graham Hill. And they also were the place that drivers such as Niki Lauda really cut their teeth and started their career. But this car is beautiful. Even the paint is hand painted on. You certainly don't get that in Formula One races today. It's an absolute thing of beauty. Comparison to some of the ones we've looked at, you've got the big front wing, rear wing, big air intake. It looks a little bit different to the Kuiper cars. A lot of development's gone on since the 1950s, 60s, through into the 70s. These cars are stunning.
You can kind of see the evolution, but all throughout the years you can see that evolution. I mean, Team Surtees, this car here, I mean, John Surtees, what a driver, you know, not only just in Formula One.
Yeah, not just a driver, he was a rider as well. So he was Britain's and the world's only world champion on 2 and 4 wheels. He won 4 motorcycle world championships and then went on in 1964 to win the Formula One Drivers' World title. And so it's a real pleasure to have both bikes and cars that John rode and raced here at the Silverstone Museum.
Talking about Formula One champions, Damon Hill, one of them as well. I mean, this Williams, this is as we start to get into the more modern area. This is kind of the 90s. I mean, tell us about this, because this is a real feat of, you know, British team, British driver. This is kind of British engineering, I guess, at its best, isn't it?
It is. So the Williams Formula One team, iconic within Formula One, and one of those most successful, certainly most successful British teams out there. This car is a real step away from the kind of things we've been looking at. You've got carbon fibre. We've got the huge amount of aerodynamic development that's gone on this, and safety, the high sides and things like that around the driver's head. We really started to develop that after the unfortunate incident with Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger in May of '94. But this car is a World Championship winner. So we talked briefly about Graham Hill, the 1962 champion. Well, this is his son, Damon Hill, who won the world title back in 1996. And this car is the car that took him to that world title. A real piece of Formula One history, and an iconic British Formula One car that raced here at Silverstone and, you know, incredibly successful all the way around the world.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us today and showing all these wonderful cars. I mean, I don't think really you can celebrate British motor racing better than being here at the Silverstone Museum and looking at beautiful cars like this. Of course, this year, such a special year, celebrating 75 years of Formula One.
The golden age of cigarette advertising. Now, stay with me, Martin Daubney on GB News. Britain's News Channel. Up next, Reform UK top yet another poll. Now it's time for your weather, and here's Alex Deakin.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's turned milder and it's going to be very mild through tomorrow, but it won't feel as mild because it'll be quite breezy and yes, there's quite a bit of rain to come as well. There's a lot of weather fronts ganging up out in the Atlantic. They're moving in. The isobars are squeezing together, telling us the winds are picking up. Band of heavy rain crossing Scotland this evening. Northern England seeing some heavy downpours too. You might even hear a crack of thunder here and there. Just generally staying cloudy with outbreaks of rain on and off through the night. That breeze, the cloud, all helping to keep the temperatures up. A much milder night than we've had by morning. Temperatures 7 or 8 degrees in the east, double figures further south and west. But as I said, it won't necessarily feel that mild because it's going to be cloudy and for many a wet start to the day. That rain on and off across northern Scotland, but some drier spells. Another pulse of heavier rain coming into southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. It could be a very wet start to the morning rush hour here. There'll be some heavier outbreaks of rain too, crossing western England and Wales. Parts of eastern England, generally dry but fairly drab. But as I say, you'll notice that jump in temperatures compared to recent mornings. Some of that showery rain will work its way into eastern England. Heavier pulses of rain, the brighter colours there across northern England, parts of Wales. Northern Ireland cheering up for a time, but then more showers come in here later on. Wales, western parts of England do look a bit brighter come the end of the day. And look at that, it's milder. Temperatures in double digits pretty much across the board, and many places getting into the teens. Friday also looking mild, but also looking wet. There's Met Office warnings in place for the wind and the rain across parts of the west, and it will be a very wet day in western areas. Much of the east of England staying dry on Friday until late on, but it's going to be a blustery day wherever you are. But those winds coming up from the south, so again on Friday it will be much milder than it has been.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Lincolnshire at Grimsby, Westgate, the A180, that's partly blocked after a collision between the Lock Hill and Westgate roundabouts. In Leicestershire, the A42 is partly blocked southbound after a vehicle caught fire just by the exit to Colville at junction 13. In Bedfordshire, the M1 southbound is partly blocked by a broken down lorry. It's just after junction 11 for Dunstable South, Luton and the A505 turn-off, so do expect queues on the approach there. And in Hertfordshire, the M25, there are solid queues clockwise in the roadworks on the M25 between junction 22 for St Albans and 23 for the A1M at South Mimms.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Now, we've got some breaking news for you just freshly off the press. It's this. Donald Trump has called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator. He's called him a dictator. We'll have the full analysis on that incredible announcement later in the show. And also on today's show, the pro-Corbyn MP Zara Sultana has been reported to the Speaker of the House for posting a picture of Nigel Farage, the critics are saying is a disgrace and a clear incitement to violence. Should Sultana get the boot? Or is this just more right-wing snowflakery? And an incredible new report shows that 66% of all immigration to the UK over the past 20 years has had its origin in the European Union. And it concludes, the data proves that Tony Blair's disastrous open borders policy changed Britain forever. And a Turkish couple who paid for their 2 children aged just 6 and 9 to be illegally shipped to Britain on a dinghy are now applying for asylum themselves. They claim, of course, that the ECHR should respect their rights to a family life. but could this use of unaccompanied children open the floodgates to yet more illegal immigration? And an unholy row has broken out after the actress Cynthia Erivo, a black woman, has been cast to play Jesus in a Hollywood play of Jesus Christ Superstar. Critics have slammed it as blasphemy and roared, "Is nothing sacred, not even Jesus Christ himself, from the perils of wokery." And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show. Pleasure to have your company. Feast your eyes on this tweet from Zara Sultana, the Member of Parliament Independent for Coventry. It's a picture, as you can see, of Nigel Farage, a caricature of him looking, well, slightly manic, with a line through him, a no entry sign, Birmingham, 28th of March 2025. That is the date of Reform UK's biggest ever rally in Birmingham. Sultana and her mob, looks like, are going to turn up to have yet another little protest. But my question to you today is this. Is that an incitement to violence? Is that the kind of thing that Zara Sultana would take to her fainting couch about if that were a picture of her with a line through her, or Sadiq Khan with a line through her? You know, bet on your Nelly. That would be Islamophobia. It would be racist. It would be a clear incitement to hatred. Or is it just a picture? Is this the right-wingers getting as snowflakey as the left-wingers? That's today's debate. I'm about to have it. It's going to be a right old ding-dong with these fellas. Ben Habib is in the studio and Nigel Nelson. They're already dusting off their knuckle dusters. And also to my right is Chris Hope, our political editor. It's going to be one heck of a debate. Make sure you tune in. Get involved in that conversation. What do you think about that picture? Should we get over it, or is it a clear incitement to hatred? GBNews.com/you'll say. Now, your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much indeed. 3 minutes past 4. Let's just start with that breaking news Martin touched on at the top of the hour, that in the last few minutes, Donald Trump has launched, well, a scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, claiming he needs to move fast or risk losing Ukraine entirely. If you're watching on television, you can see here that post from the current US president on his own platform, Truth Social, accusing Zelensky of doing a terrible job and suggesting he was prolonging the war to keep the gravy train of support flowing. Donald Trump also claimed he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying that Joe Biden never tried and that Europe has failed to bring peace. Well, plenty more on those latest lines coming into us from Donald Trump regarding Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian war later this hour. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky has also, in response, accused Donald Trump of spreading disinformation. That's after the US president appeared to blame Ukraine for starting the war with Russia. In a speech earlier, before releasing his post on Truth Social, he said Kyiv should have never started it and could have made a deal. Take a listen.
This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
Back here at home, UK inflation has jumped to 3%. That is the fastest rise in 10 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. With energy, water and council tax bills also set to rise in April, households are bracing for more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could push prices up even further. The government is warning the road to low inflation will be bumpy, while political parties trade blame over tax and spending policies. Here's what the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, had to say.
Unexpectedly large rise that is going to impact families right up and down the country. But look, this has happened because of choices this government has made. It's gone out and spent a lot of money, borrowed a lot of money. That's been inflationary. It has also neglected productivity when it cut those public sector wage deals. There were no productivity requirements attached to that. And of course, the national insurance increases for employers will in part at least be passed on, and is being passed on, by way of higher prices. So those are decisions that this government took, and they were the wrong decisions.
Retailers selling knives online are set to face stricter laws as a review has found it's easier for children to buy blades than paracetamol. New rules mean tougher prison sentences for selling knives to under 18s and a legal duty for retailers to report bulk or suspicious purchases. The crackdown follows tragedies linked to unlicensed knife sales as the government's vowing to protect young people from knife crime. A builder who murdered his wife and stepson after refusing to accept their divorce has been jailed for life with a minimum of 34 years. Calogero Ricotta stabbed Maria Negura to death in their Essex home before killing her son Giuseppe as he tried to protect his mother. A judge called Ricotta controlling and coercive and said his vanity, pride and ego led to the murders. Well, officers were at the scene within just minutes and he was quickly arrested.
Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Get on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands behind your head. Hands behind your head. Don't move. Don't move. You're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You don't have to say anything. I'm a defence to mention my questions on your line in court. You do something, give evidence. Put your other hands behind your back.
Jonathan Reynolds is facing accusations of fabricating his CV after repeatedly describing himself as a solicitor, despite never qualifying. The business secretary told MPs he worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre before becoming an MP in 2010. In reality, he quit his training contract before qualifying to run for Parliament. Well, Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollinrake has called on Jonathan Reynolds to come clean and explain himself in Parliament.
You cannot fabricate your CV, and we've seen this, of course, with Rachel Reeves, who's had to make several alterations to her CV, and now it seems Johnny Reynolds as well. So I think having done that in Parliament, you're duty bound to come to Parliament to actually put the record straight.
Let's just bring you an update on the situation in Brazil, where a British journalist has been reported missing there, with calls for authorities to step up their searches. 32-year-old Charlotte Pete was last contacted on the 8th of February in Sao Paulo before travelling, or planning to travel, we understand, to Rio, but she hasn't been heard from since. Her family has given her passport and flight details to Brazilian police, and the Brazil Homicide Department is now assisting in that search. The UK Foreign Office says it's also supporting the family and is in contact with local authorities. And some weather news for you. The UK's cold and grey spell is thankfully finally coming to an end, with much milder weather on the way. By the end of the week, temperatures will be above average across the country, with warmer weather higher than Greece, which is in the grip of an unusual cold snap. Some eastern areas could see highs of 16 degrees on Friday, a big jump from the usual 9 degrees for mid-February. But with low pressure taking over, unsettled conditions will follow, bringing wind and rain, potentially the UK's first named storm of the month. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Westminster and Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Now, I've got that major breaking news story for you now, and it's this, that the US President Donald J. Trump has accused Volodymyr Zelensky of being a dictator without elections. He said has done a terrible job, and also suggested he was prolonging the war to keep the gravy train of support flowing. Well, Trump also claimed that he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying Biden never tried and Europe has failed to bring peace. Well, it's an absolutely withering attack from the US president on Volodymyr Zelensky. And let's get the full rundown now with GB News' home and security editor Mark White. Mark, an astonishing outburst. Tell us more.
Well, it's gone all rather unnecessary, all very quickly, it seems. I think this follows remarks from Volodymyr Zelensky earlier in the day when he said, effectively, that President Trump existed in a bubble of misinformation. Well, clearly now, President Trump, never one to take these things lying down, has fired back, and boy, has he fired back. Listen, it's worth me reading it out, if you'll bear with me. Think of it, he says, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion, more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalisation in this war? It's far more important to Europe than it is to us. We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues, he says. Well, to say that's withering is an understatement. I mean, he has opened both barrels on Volodymyr Zelensky there. And it will be very interesting to see where this leaves all of the peace process going forward, because it's clear he's sort of, if you like, sort of nailed his colours to the mast in terms of what he thinks of Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, will Volodymyr Zelensky really believe that President Trump can be an honest broker in the deal between him and Russia if we get to the peace talk stage? And what on earth does this mean, and where does it leave European leaders? Just obviously, like the rest of us, observing these comments that have come out from President Trump.
Well, Mark White, we are used to Donald Trump being frank and forthright, but this, it's nuclear. It really is nuclear. Mark White, thank you very, very much for bringing us up to speed on an astonishing outburst. Let's get this back to the studio now, joined by Chris Hope, our political editor, as well as Ben Habib and Nigel Nelson. Chris, it's an astonishing outburst. Where do we start? This politician, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Mother Teresa of international politics. Criticism hasn't even been forthcoming from anybody in the world. And where do we even begin with this? Where do we begin?
Well, there's claims, I mean, throwing shade on Zelensky, who's widely admired across the world, the way he's been this focal point for resistance against Russia. A modestly successful comedian is how Donald Trump describes him. He says also in terms that Zelensky has told him that half the money we've sent him is missing.
That's a huge line.
That's a huge line.
That's huge.
That's $350 billion spent on this war by the US. Half that is missing, according to Donald Trump. He refuses to have elections. He's a dictator without elections, Zelensky. He better move fast or he won't have a country left as a threat to Zelensky. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia. Only Trump can do this. Biden never tried. Zelensky may want to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, he says, but Zelensky's doing a terrible job. It's a complete turning the whole conversation about Zelensky on its head.
Well, I mean, we've gone from Zelensky, the untouchable king, to Zelensky, the pawn, but now Donald Trump has just kicked the entire chessboard.
I'm just looking back at those remarks that Mark White referred to. Zelensky has been doing an interview on his own today elsewhere. He has accused Trump of disinformation after appearing to blame Ukraine for starting in the war. He said of Trump yesterday, Trump had said you've been there for 3 years, you never made a deal. Zelensky replied, with all due respect to Trump as a leader, he's living in this disinformation bubble. I wonder if that attack triggered this.
Incredible state of affairs. Let's bring in my panel now for some reaction. I want to bring in you, Nigel Nelson, first. This is an astonishing assault on the entire legacy of Zelensky, and the talk of half of the money going missing is an incredible thing to say. This is a huge, huge sum of money.
It is, and the question is, has it gone missing, or has it been spent on fighting the war? I mean, so far, the kind of claims that President Trump has been making have just not been true. That when he talks about...
How can you say that, Nigel?
Pardon?
How can you say that?
Well, I'll give an example from yesterday, that he said that Zelensky's approval rating was 4%. It's not, it's 58%, roughly the same as Trump's is in America.
How do you know that?
because the surveys that have come out of Ukraine, when they've actually polled Ukrainians, has come out with that figure.
And who put those polls out? Was it the equivalent of the Ukrainian government?
I haven't seen whether it was
marking its own homework.
I've not checked whether it's a YouGov or something like that, but those are the Ukrainian polls.
Yeah, but it's a bit like Hamas was claiming all those deaths, you know, and we're relying on a prescribed terrorist organisation to tell us what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah, but are you suggesting that Zelensky's running a terrorist organisation?
No, but I'd be very...
You sound a bit more like Donald Trump.
No, I'm not suggesting that for a moment, but I find it very surprising if there's anything close to a poll with any integrity taking place in a war zone.
Well, I mean, let's take that as an example, that President Trump is calling for elections. Why? Zelensky's a dictator because he's not had an election. There's been a war going on. We didn't have an election during the Second World War because we were rather busy fighting the Germans and the Japanese. Zelensky's been pretty busy fighting the Russians.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say I have a great deal of sympathy with what Trump has just said. And all of us know, anyone who's got the remotest bit of nous about them, that war zones and the arms trade is a unique and brilliant opportunity for people to make money. And it happens. And I've been looking at this askance and people supporting the war effort who typically don't have an ideological bone in their body, but wrapping themselves in the Ukrainian flag ahead of wrapping themselves in the Union flag and putting British money at Zelensky's disposal. Biden putting this massive sum, $350 billion. I think we've spent the thick end of $20 billion in this country on it, and no questions asked. And this is the point. We have said what Zelensky wishes for Ukraine is what we will back. Not once until Trump was elected has anyone said, actually, we need to look at this through the prism of what is in the interest of the United States of America and what is in the interest of the United Kingdom.
Do you justify the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
I do absolutely think that a contributory cause for Russia's invasion of Ukraine was EU interference and EU reliance on Russian oil and gas. And the interference came before the 2014 invasion of the Crimea, when the EU was offering financial packages to Ukraine, turning its head away from Russia towards the West. And then after Crimea was invaded, France and Germany actually sat on Ukraine and said, you must accept the cessation of Crimea to Russia, emboldening Russia for its next move, which was this invasion.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That was a mistake. To allow Ukraine to lose Crimea back in 2014 was a huge mistake.
A huge mistake.
But bear in mind that we remember what happened during the First World War, as it was the centenary, and what the concern was then was that suddenly, within 37 days, as happened in 1914, the world could be at war.
Gentlemen,
that's why the West moved back.
Gentlemen, the history lesson is great. Let's get back to the here and now. Zelensky, utterly sidelined, utterly cast out into the cold. He was meant to be the central player in this, Chris Hope. Suddenly, Donald Trump has come into town. The European Union, we saw yesterday, utterly...
It is all changed, Martin.
Utterly neutered, sidelined, not even consulted. They're all jumping up and down saying, well, hang on, what about European Union? Swept out under the carpet. Now, Zelensky, the central player, also utterly sidelined. This is the straight deal now between Putin and Trump. It's an incredible state of affairs.
Well, and Putin's saying, of course, that Zelensky or Ukraine will be allowed back into the talks. Europe hasn't helped. Why wasn't Zelensky in Paris on Monday? Instead, he wasn't there, wasn't invited. He was in Turkey on his own, looking physically sidelined, if nothing else. I wonder, just with a UK perspective on this, if this has strangely bolstered Starmer in the past week, because he now can make a play to be this bridge between Europe and the US. It's now a Europe problem much more than it was when Biden was in charge. And we do know also that the US, the senior people who represent the Trump in UK at the moment were in Number 10 today, having meetings about business issues with Jonathan Reynolds. So I just wonder whether ahead of the meeting next week in Washington, we could see maybe Starmer being emboldened on the world stage from this.
Or being used as a poodle.
Well, question mark.
I just want to say one other thing. We saw in J.D. Vance's speech in Munich, effectively the United States declaring war on the liberal global order, saying we're sick of the constitutional damage, the democratic deficit, the absence of free speech that this liberal global order has delivered. And the Ukrainian-Russian war was supported by that liberal global order. President Biden, the Europeans, completely in bed with Zelensky. No questions asked. And this is a further step towards bringing back policy away from the liberal global order to national interests. This is Trump saying, we've given you $350 billion. We want this ended. And for Zelensky to bite the hand that feeds him by saying yesterday, no deal that Trump strikes with Putin is going to be acceptable to us unless we're part of that deal. And then to say what he said about Trump today is absolutely stupid.
Okay.
And I'm delighted that there's the prospect of peace in Ukraine. Everyone should be delighted. We shouldn't be warmongering. Russia's had a bloody nose from this conflict. It's time to have peace.
OK, gentlemen, a sparking start to the hour. Stick with us. There's going to be more after the break. But before that, we're giving you 2 chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway. Sadly, not $350 billion, but we do have 2 amazing prize bundles to be won. Here's the details you need to enter.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, we're going to have another ding-dong in the studio because the Independent MP Zara Sultan has been reported to the Speaker for a picture of Nigel Farage. Some are saying it's an incitement to violence. That's next with me, Martin Daubney. I'm a panel on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're
Proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 4:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the former Labour and now independent MP, Zara Sultana, well, she's been reported to the Speaker. She's been labelled a disgrace after asking her followers to save the date in this social media post. It's the 28th of March, and that, of course, is the same day as Reform UK's major rally in Birmingham. But I want to ask, would there be uproar if Nigel Farage tweeted a picture of Miss Sultana asking to save the date with a red line through her? Is this unfairly targeting the Reform UK leader and putting his safety at risk? Or is it the right wing just being a bunch of snowflakes? Well, let's turn now to our political editor, Chris Hope. And, of course, our panel is going to come into that. Nigel Nelson and Ben Habib already just lacing up their gloves for this one. Before that, Chris, set out to our viewers and listeners what the hoo-ha is about.
Right, so Zara Sultana, MP for Coventry South since 2019, not a Labour MP, suspended since by breaking the whip by voting for a two-child benefit cap last summer, and along with John McDonnell, independent MP at the moment. She put out this message, you'll see on the screen in a moment, on Twitter, on X, this week, with a line through the face of Nigel Farage. Birmingham, 28th of 3rd, 2025, the same time as Reform UK is holding a massive rally in Birmingham. Now, that can mean two things. Is it a road sign saying not welcome here, or is it something more sinister? Zia Youssef, who is the party chairman, he says this is disgraceful, a disgraceful tweet to make against a fellow MP who requires round-the-clock protection due to credible threats to his life. If Keir Starmer had any standards, he would sack you. That's the message directed straight at this MP by Zia Youssef, the party chairman. They see it on Reform UK side as a threat to Nigel Farage's safety, and therefore the party, Lee Anderson is the chief whip, they've reported this tweet to the Speaker of the House of Commons. He's passed it, we understand, to the Common Security people who assess risk to MPs. It'll be raised at a meeting next week of the Speaker's Committee on MPs' Safety. We're told by the party that the appropriate action has been taken. Privately, they point to the rally in Leicester. When I was there interviewing Lee Anderson, actually, coincidentally, there were ugly scenes outside, protesters spitting, jostling Reform UK members going in. They see this could generate more of the same. And just finally, we've been to Zara Sultana for comment by phone and by email. No comment yet. We don't know what she means by this tweet, so it's a debate.
And it's a rarity to the point of non-existent. The Zara Sultana hasn't got anything to say. So there we go. Let's bring in my panel now. Ben Habib, on the one hand, you could say it's just a piece of paper. It's just a tweet. On the other hand, there is a very real security threat to parliamentarians such as Nigel Farage. He's been milkshaked. He's been attacked. He has a security detail. We know all of this. Is this really appropriate by a parliamentarian?
It's not appropriate for a parliamentarian on any side of the House to be putting up caricatures of other elected politicians, or indeed anyone, and belittling politics, taking politics down the kind of gutter route that kind of cartoon does. And if I were Nigel, I'd be particularly affronted by the bad caricature. It didn't even look like Nigel, did it? And but the remarkable thing, I think, here is that Nigel takes all of this in his stride. You know, we talked about snowflake right-wingery, but, I mean, actually, Nigel is no snowflake. And we've got to give credit where credit is due. Nigel very rarely makes a fuss when this kind of nonsense happens. But as you rightly say, had it been the other way round about Zara Sultana, it sounds like a cake, doesn't it, Zara Sultana? If it had been the other way round...
Or a fruitcake.
Or a fruitcake, everyone would be up in arms. So, you know, all credit to Nigel. It'll blow over. Hopefully nothing will happen. But can't parliamentarians just grow up and try running the country?
Nigel?
Well, I mean, on a thing like this, the question is, what does it mean? And as far as I can see, there is nothing threatening in this. All it shows, as Chris has just mentioned, it is a kind of traditional stop sign. It is Nigel Farage isn't welcome in Birmingham for his rally. The suggestion about save the date obviously implies there will be some kind of protest outside the Birmingham arena where the rally is taking place. But beyond that, it doesn't say anything more. And the idea idea that reform should get terribly excited about it seems to me completely bizarre. As you say, Nigel Farage himself would just brush it off.
But what would happen then if this were a picture of Miss Sultana with a line through?
She gets loads of them.
Or a picture of Sadiq Khan.
She gets some.
You know, no way, mate. You know full well they'd be saying it's Islamophobic, it's racist, it's an incitement to violence. They'd be having a fit of the vapours about it.
She gets hate mail constantly, largely because of her support for Gaza. So she's used to it. I can't believe that she would bother hugely if the same thing happened to her and she was travelling to, say, Sevenoaks, where Nigel lives.
But she doesn't live in Birmingham, does she? She's Coventry.
Coventry. She's a Coventry
so that's
MP.
Last time I looked, Coventry's not Birmingham.
No, it's not. It's not. But it is nearby.
Yeah.
And what she's saying there is that we don't want reform in Birmingham. That's her opinion. It's her opinion.
So she's trying to cancel a party that is polling the highest in the United Kingdom.
She is talking, if we interpret it correctly, about some kind of protest outside.
At the very least, it's incredibly lowbrow, isn't it, Nigel? Don't you think they should grow up, these people?
But I think all MPs should stop insulting each other publicly anyway. I don't see that it actually serves any point. But in this case, there is nothing here for reform to get so excited about. And the idea of reporting it to the Speaker as a security issue, it's not.
Are you saying then that reform are being snowflakes, Nigel?
Reform are being very snowflakey on this one, yes.
I wonder if that's the case. I mean, we can laugh about it, but, you know, this has been interacted with now almost 2 million times on social media. Been very, very widely seen. How do we know? There might not be some random nutter out there who takes
never know. This is the problem. You never know.
If there is that scintilla of risk, why take it? Why would a parliamentarian go there?
But as you say, you're talking about things that are random. What happened to Joe Cox and David Amess were completely random. Yes, there's a threat. I mean, I don't diminish the idea that MPs are under threat a lot of the time. The Speaker takes it very seriously, which is why he would refer something like this to his Security Committee. That's absolutely right. But the whole thing is, they're always under threat. MPs need...
but when you have a parliamentarian putting a no entry sign or cancel sign on Nigel's face.
Well, no, let's call it a not welcome sign.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean,
it's basically it's legitimising that view. It's saying to her base and saying to people in Birmingham and Coventry.
Where can you see in that image anything that is vaguely threatening?
No, but it's legitimising the cancellation of another elected official. It's legitimising that kind of opprobrium.
No, what she's saying is...
So there may be a nutter out there who says, well, Zara Sultana is an MP. She doesn't like Nigel. He's obviously a bad guy. You know, I'll help her out with Nigel.
All those things are possible, but in which case...
why do it?
Cancel all speeches in the House of Commons.
No, but why
because it might encourage somebody to go out and murder an MP.
No, there are some very serious issues which we need to discuss, like the gang rape gangs, for example, which we should discuss without fear or favour, and other people may get caught in the crossfire of that kind of discussion, but it is a required discussion because it presents a threat to the nation. Nigel Farage does not present a threat to the nation. He's an elected politician.
Absolutely. And what Zara Sultana is saying is that she does not want him in the Midlands, and that's why she's put the sign up. That's fine, that's her opinion. Other people will say, yes, let's have the reform rally there, it'll be very popular.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. And just to point out, we are still awaiting that response from so far tight-lipped Zara Sultana, uncharacteristically so, but we'll bring that to you if and when we get it. Thank you very much, Nigel Nelson and Ben Habib, and of course, Chris Hope. Fantastic start to this hour. Now let's crack on. It's your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon from the newsroom just after 4:30. Well, Donald Trump has launched a scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a dictator who he says has done a terrible job and shattered the country. In a post on Truth Social, the US president suggested Zelensky was prolonging the war to keep the gravy train of support flowing. And Trump also claimed he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying Joe Biden never tried and that Europe has failed to bring peace. UK inflation has jumped to 3%. That's the fastest rise in 10 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. But with energy, water and council tax bills also set to rise in April, households are bracing for more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could push prices up even further. The government's also warning the road to low inflation will be bumpy, and political parties are trading blame over tax and spending policies. A builder who murdered his wife and stepson after refusing to accept their divorce has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 34 years. Calogero Ricotta stabbed Maria Negura to death at their Essex home before killing her stepson Giuseppe as he tried to protect his mother. A judge called Ricotta controlling and coercive and said his vanity, pride and ego led to the murders. While officers were at the scene of that incident within just minutes, where he was quickly arrested.
Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Get on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands behind your head. Hands behind your head. Don't move. Don't move. You're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You don't have to say anything. My defence to mention my question, something lying in court. You can do something, give evidence.
And the BBC is under fire over claims it aired Hamas propaganda in a new Gaza documentary. It's accused of featuring a child narrator without disclosing he's the son of a Hamas minister and grandson of a founding member of Hamas. The programme, Gaza How to Survive a War Zone, aired on Monday, showing the conflict through the eyes of children, and critics say it raises serious questions about bias. But the broadcaster insists the film follows its editorial guidelines. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup at 5 o'clock, and Martin will be straight back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Lincolnshire at Skegness, Burr Road, the A158, that's been shut in both directions after a water main burst between Lincoln Road and Burr Old Road. In Leicestershire, the A42 is partly blocked southbound after a vehicle caught fire at junction 13 for Colville and the A511. In Berkshire, the M4 westbound is partly blocked after a collision between junction 8 for Maidenhead and junction 10 for Wokingham and the A329M. And in Kent at Sevenoaks, the Sevenoaks bypass, the A21, that's partly blocked in both directions near the turn-off for Hildenborough and the A225, so do expect delays on the approach.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to 8 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, we've got a breaking news line. Let's get that from our political editor, Chris Hope, on this hoo-ha between Zara Sultana and Reform UK.
Yeah, well, we have a comment now from Zara Sultana. Don't forget, she has posted this indication, this image of Nigel Farage saying, "Don't come here," or lying through his face for 28th of the 3rd, 2025. That's next month, of course. She has now told GB News the following: as a born and bred Brummie whose parents suffered the violent consequences of far-right politics, I speak for many in this proud, multicultural city when I say we reject the politics of hatred and division. She goes on, in my view, based on the comments they have made publicly about Muslims and migrants, Reform UK is comparable to the National Front and the BNP.
Oh dear, oh dear.
We pushed back against them before, and we'll do it again, she says. Reform UK, she says, is a party bankrolled by billionaires and led by an ex-banker, public school boys. Its leader boasts of being the only politician in Britain keeping Thatcher's legacy alive, the same Thatcherism that decimated pit towns and pit villages and post-industrial towns across the Midlands, leaving generational scars. Their MPs vote against the workers while bending over backwards for the elites who fund them. Their relentless scapegoating of Muslims and migrants is nothing more than a cynical ploy to deflect from the real culprits, the powerful screwing over our diverse working-class communities. She ends, we stand for solutions, not scapegoats. On March 28th, we'll make that clear.
It's an astonishing statement, and one we'll have to dive into later in the show.
It's going to really hurt Nigel Farage because he thinks, in his world, he stopped the BNP by creating UKIP all those years ago.
And comparing, Reform UK is comparable to the National Front and the British National Party. That goes way beyond calling them far-right. It's saying they are comparable to the most toxic political parties in British history from the political right. This story is really
throwing petrol in the flames.
It really, really is. Thank you, Chris Hope. We'll just explore that more at 5 o'clock, but we have to move on now to another astonishing story because a new book explores what's been dubbed the European Union's propaganda by proxy. According to the EU's propaganda machine, the European Commission invests money, billions of euros, in fact, in non-government organisations and think tanks that align with its vision of deeper European integration, something its author claims reflects a broader trend of anti-democratic governance. Well, I'm now joined by the author of that report, and that is Thomas Fazzi. Thomas, welcome to the show, and thank you for waiting patiently in the wings. It's been a very busy news day here in London. It's an incredible report. The sums of monies are astonishing, and lay out for us, if you can, how the EU is using billions of euros of taxpayers' money to further its own political agenda.
Yes, hi, thank you, Martin. Well, I mean, thanks to Trump's decision to freeze the USAID program, we now know the extent to which the American government was using USAID not to provide aid to the poorest people on the planet or whatever, but actually to essentially channel money to NGOs to promote America's geopolitical interests abroad by funding NGOs to influence public opinion in third countries and even to destabilize and regime change governments that were perceived as being hostile to American interests, and they've done this for years across the planet, including Ukraine, obviously. And so, you know, we should rejoice in the fact that this program has been at least frozen, and we can only hope that it doesn't get restarted in any shape or form. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the European Union and the European Commission more specifically has its own, you know, equivalent of USAID, which is this program called SERVE, which was introduced in 2021 with a budget of almost 2 trillion euros over a 5-year period. So we're not talking about insignificant amounts of money. And this program is officially aimed at promoting EU values. And this may sound innocent enough insofar as the European Union's official values are democracy, human rights, the rule of law, etc., etc. Except that we know that the European Union systematically violates these principles, systematically violates its supposed values, and in fact its very existence is a negation of democracy, supposedly one of the European Union's core values. And in fact, when you look, as I did in the process of writing this report, at exactly what this money is used for and what these NGOs and think tanks are using this money for, There are, of course, valid projects that are supported. Projects that are aimed at fighting, violence against women and violence against children. So not all the money is used for propaganda, but a huge amount of it is. And in fact, we find that under the guise of promoting EU values, the European Union, the European Commission is in fact promoting specific ideologies, specific policies, specific ideas of social organization that are often at odds with the prevailing cultural sentiment in many countries. And so we find a lot of projects.
Thomas, I just want to get into some of the specifics of how this money has been spent, because the sums of money are incredible. €250 million to the pro-EU European news network Euronews over 10 years. Now, Euronews was paid for by member state taxpayers even after Brexit. So it was pumping out pro-Brussels propaganda paid for, including by British taxpayers, before we'd fully Brexited. $270 million to various think tanks in Romania, Bulgaria and Italy, and also €250 million to the pro-EU Centre for European Policy Studies, a think tank which argues for greater EU integration. So spending taxpayers' money to spread the European dream, even against taxpayers' or voters' will.
Yeah, this is exactly it. So aside from, promoting specific ideologies, we see that a lot of the money is actually used to promote the EU itself and, the European Commission's goals of greater integration. And in fact, we find countless projects that are, destined at showing the benefits of the European Union, explaining to citizens the importance of being in the European Union, and in fact, the importance of the need for greater integration. So this is, can only be characterized as, what I call propaganda by proxy, because, it's not the European Commission doing an official communications campaign, which would be somewhat legitimate, even though I would consider it, a questionable use of our taxpayer money. But this is propaganda by proxy. So you're using supposed NGOs, which in many cases are fully dependent on Commission money.
Thomas, I'm afraid I have to cut you short there. We've simply ran out of time. Thanks for patiently waiting. It's a fantastic report. The EU's propaganda machine, and its author, Thomas Farsi, there, joined us on the show. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, and who can blame you, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Winds from the north will bring a real chill to Greece and Turkey over the next few days. Meanwhile, plenty of sunny skies in Spain. There's that northerly wind making many of the Greek islands colder than the UK. Certainly chillier across parts of Croatia. Some sunny spells in Italy, along with a few showers. Fine and sunny weather for the Balearics and southern Spain, along with the Canaries. And the breeze here will be easing. But that cold wind will continue to blow across the Greek islands into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather has changed. It's turning milder, but it's also turning quite blustery. The wind's going to get stronger over the next few days. We'll all see further spells of rain, all thanks to low pressure systems and weather fronts. Look at them all lining up out in the Atlantic, finally pushing away the high pressure that's brought most of us a pretty dry February so far. But it's going to be far from dry tonight. Patchy rain here and there, but many eastern areas dry this evening. But look at that rain spreading its way in. Some of that rain on the heavy side too. A lot of cloud around, and the winds continuing to strengthen. Quite chilly this evening across parts of the east, but these are the temperatures by morning, 7 or 8 degrees above freezing in some parts of the south and the west. Start Thursday in double digits, but also start pretty drab, fairly blustery with further outbreaks of rain to come. It's going to be a grey day across much of Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy across the north initially, but further pulses of heavier rain coming into the southwest, and a pretty wet start for Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain here for the morning rush hour. Outbreaks of rain too across Wales and southwest England. Parts of eastern England having a dry start, but again, don't expect it to last. The breeze continuing to strengthen, getting really quite windy in western areas as this next band of rain works in across northern England, North Wales, covering Scotland. Should turn a bit brighter in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland for a time, but then more showers come in during the afternoon. Wales, southwest England, northwest England also looking a bit brighter to end the day. We're all looking milder. Look at the temperatures. Double digits across the board. Some places getting into the teens. We might even squeak up to 15 or even 16 Celsius. Still a few heavy showers around across northeast England and Scotland on Thursday evening, but many places becoming dry for a time. But behind me, there's more wet weather moving in, and that means further spells of wet weather for Friday and through the weekend. Also looking pretty gusty at times as well.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 4:51. Now, poor health and lack of exercise is having an impact on life expectancy in England, as it's declined for the first time in recent years, and it's down to 81 years of age. Well, what on earth is going on? Well, let's speak now to the former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Steve, welcome to the show. So we're getting fatter and we're dying younger, and Scotland is the fat shame capital of all of mainland Europe. Tell us more.
Well, I think number one is about personal responsibility. And frankly, I've been proved right. Over the years, I've been saying that this would happen. I've been making it clear that we should be telling people that being fat is bad. And the reason I give you that example is because the culture in this country is that we celebrate being fat. I've said many times we've gone from the catwalk to the fat walk, for example. Secondly, what we also need to be thinking about here in terms of the reduction in life expectancy is because of those ridiculous lengthy lockdowns. Those lockdowns, in my personal opinion, killed people because people weren't getting tested for cancers and so forth. So that's the second reason. Now, what we need to be thinking about is what we're going to do about it. But I'm going to be rather political on this, when we've got a government that's giving I've got it down here, £11.6 billion abroad for climate aid, right, to other countries. And what's happening? We can't invest that into subsidising healthy foods, for example, or putting that money into dementia care, for example. So there is a real political issue as well. And also in this country, when it comes to the National Health Service, of course, in my view, all of this, what's it called? This equality stuff, DEI, is it? DEI and all of that palaver. Listen, I'm as camp as Christmas. I'm a gay man. I do not need money spent on DE-blooming-I. The year is 2025. It's not 1985. Put that money into the front line, into the clinicians, and save lives. We don't need more bureaucracy. The world's gone mad on that stuff. So, yes, I think we need to scrap that. And we need to be scrapping initiatives like fat acceptance, love your curves. That's why people are now dying earlier. They've got too fat, and we've been celebrating it.
Steve, I wish we could carry on longer. You've been a breath of fresh air. Magnificent as ever. Thank you very, very much, my friend. Now, stick with us here on GB News. Of course, full reaction to Donald Trump calling Zelensky a dictator and a half-baked comedian. That's next. Now, here's your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's turned milder and it's going to be very mild through tomorrow, but it won't feel as mild because it'll be quite breezy and yes, there's quite a bit of rain to come as well. There's a lot of weather fronts ganging up out in the Atlantic. They're moving in. The isobars are squeezing together, telling us the winds are picking up. Band of heavy rain crossing Scotland this evening. Northern England seeing some heavy downpours too. Might even hear a crack of thunder here and there. Just generally staying cloudy with outbreaks of rain on and off through the night. That breeze, the cloud, all helping to keep the temperatures up. A much milder night than we've had by morning. Temperatures 7 or 8 degrees in the east, double figures further south and west. But as I said, it won't necessarily feel that mild because it's going to be cloudy and for many a wet start to the day. That rain on and off across northern Scotland, but some drier spells. Another pulse of heavier rain coming into southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. It could be a very wet start to the morning rush hour here. There'll be some heavier outbreaks of rain too, crossing western England and Wales. Parts of eastern England, generally dry but fairly drab. But as I say, you'll notice that jump in temperatures compared to recent mornings. Some of that showery rain will work its way into eastern England. Heavier pulses of rain, the brighter colours there across northern England, parts of Wales. Northern Ireland cheering up for a time, but then more showers come in here later on. Wales, western parts of England do look a bit brighter come the end of the day. And look at that, it's milder. Temperatures in double digits pretty much across the board, and many places getting into the teens. Friday also looking mild, but also looking wet. There's Met Office warnings in place for the wind and the rain across parts of the west, and it will be a very wet day in western areas. Much of the east of England staying dry on Friday until late on, but it's going to be a blustery day wherever you are. But those winds coming up from the south, so again on Friday it will be much, much milder than it has been.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Staffordshire, the M6 is partly blocked in both directions after a collision between junction 14 for the A34 and 15 for Stoke-on-Trent. In the West Midlands, in Birmingham, Pershall Road, the A441, that is shut in both directions after a collision between Pebble Mill Road and the Oakfield Road junction. In Berkshire, the M4 is queuing eastbound, 2 lanes shut there after a collision between junction 8 for Maidenhead and the A404M and junction 7 for Slough West. And near Bristol, the M4 eastbound is partly blocked after a collision, and that's happened just by junction 19, the turn off Bristol and the M32, so do expect delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving you not 1, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, breaking news in this past hour. Donald Trump has sensationally called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator. In fact, a withering statement, a flamethrower to this argument. We'll have full analysis in the following hour. And pro-Corbyn MP Zara Sultana has been reported to the Speaker of the Commons, and in fact she has just posted on social media, she's moved this on. Initially she posted a picture of Nigel Farage with a line through it, but now she's doubled down and she's compared Reform UK to the National Front and to the BNP. And an incredible new report shows that 66% of all immigration to the UK over the past 20 years has been from the European Union. And it concludes, this data proves that Tony Blair's disastrous open borders policy changed Britain forever. That's all coming in your next hour. Well, it's been an astonishing day for breaking news. Donald Trump calling Volodymyr Zelensky a modestly successful comedian. And it got worse. He then called him a dictator who cancels elections. He said on top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections. It's very low in the Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle, and much, much more. It's an incredible, withering political statement, and one that's sure to reset the entire debate about America's place and the lack of a place at the table for Zelensky in negotiating what happens next in Ukraine. Plus, Zara Sultana, the independent MP, has just got back to GB News, been chasing her for comment this afternoon. She's compared Reform UK to the BNP and the British National Front, two of the most toxic right-wing parties in British political history. She just doubled down, and this is another huge debate that we're going to be having in the following hour. What do you think about all of that? Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 5 o'clock. Well, let's get a recap then of that top story that Martin was just touching on there, that Donald Trump has launched a scathing attack on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying he needs to act fast or risk losing his country. In a post on Truth Social, the US president called Zelensky a dictator and claims his leadership has led to unnecessary deaths. Zelensky's term officially ended in May 2023, but elections in Ukraine remain suspended due to martial law. Trump also claimed that he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying that Joe Biden never tried and Europe has failed to bring peace. Here at home, inflation has jumped to 3%. That's the fastest rise in 10 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. And with energy, water and council tax bills also set to rise in April, households are bracing for more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could push up prices even further. The government is warning the road to low inflation will be bumpy, while political parties trade blame over tax and spending policies. Well, here's the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride.
Unexpectedly large rise that is going to impact families right up and down the country. But look, this has happened because of choices this government has made. It's gone out and spent a lot of money, borrowed a lot of money. That's been inflationary. It has also neglected productivity when it cut those public sector wage deals. There were no productivity requirements attached to that. And of course, the national insurance increases for employers will in part at least be passed on, and is being passed on, by way of higher prices. So those are decisions that this government took, and they were the wrong decisions.
Retailers selling knives online will face stricter laws as a review has found it's easier for children to buy blades than paracetamol. New rules mean tougher prison sentences for selling knives to under 18s and a legal duty for retailers to report bulk or suspicious purchases. The crackdown follows tragedies linked to unlicensed knife sales, as the government is vowing to protect young people from knife crime. A builder who murdered his wife and stepson after refusing to accept their divorce has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 34 years. Calogero Ricotta stabbed Maria Neguria to death at their Essex home before killing her son Giuseppe as he tried to protect his mother. A judge called Ricotta controlling and coercive and said his vanity, his pride and ego led to the murders. Well, officers were at the scene of that incident within just minutes, where he was quickly arrested.
Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Get on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands behind your head. Hands behind your head. But don't move. Don't move. You're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You don't have to say anything. I'm a defence to mention my questions on your line in court. You do something, give evidence.
A 74-year-old woman has become the first person in Scotland to be arrested under the nation's new abortion buffer zones law. Police were called to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow after reports of an anti-abortion protest. The woman was arrested for breaching the exclusion zone, which prevents protesters from gathering within 200 metres of abortion clinics. The Safe Access Zones Act passed last year and aims to protect women from harassment when accessing healthcare services. And a huge sinkhole has swallowed part of a road in Surrey, forcing residents in Godstone from their homes. A major incident was declared earlier after the collapse on Monday night, with 100-metre cordon still in place. Structural experts are assessing the site, while engineers have reported that water supplies are restored, though some residents say they have discoloured water still. Business owners also say the road closure is hitting trade, while those evacuated don't know when they can return home. A British journalist has been reported missing in Brazil, with calls for authorities there to step up the search. 32-year-old Charlotte Peat last contacted a friend on the 8th of this month before planning to travel to Rio, but she hasn't been heard from since. Her family has given police her passport and flight details, while Brazil's Homicide Department is now assisting the investigation there, and the UK Foreign Office also saying it is supporting her family and in contact with local authorities. And in weather news, the UK's cold and grey spell is finally coming to an end, with much milder weather on the way. By the end of this week, temperatures will be above average across the country, warmer than Greece, in fact, which is in the grip of an unusual cold snap. Some eastern areas of the UK could see highs of up to 16 degrees on Friday. That is a big jump from the usual 9 degrees for this time of the month. But with low pressure taking over, unsettled conditions, I'm sorry to tell you, are still on the way. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, an astonishing breaking news story in this past hour. And Donald Trump has launched a withering, scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky, claiming he needs to move fast or risk losing Ukraine. The US president has accused Zelensky of being a dictator without elections. He said he has done a terrible job and suggested he was prolonging the war to keep the gravy train of support flowing. Well, Trump also claimed he alone could negotiate an end to the war. Of course he did, saying Biden never tried and Europe has failed to bring peace. Well, Mark White joins us now, GB News' home and security editor. Mark White, an astonishing statement. Trump went absolutely nuclear. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is a Trump tirade from the new sheriff in town who has got his six-shooter out. Well, not even out, he's shoot from the hip as far as his comments on Volodymyr Zelensky are concerned. I think this probably is a result of comments that Volodymyr Zelensky made earlier today, which were probably a tad or ill-judged as well, because he was accusing Donald Trump of existing in a bubble of disinformation. Now, that's never going to go down well with Donald Trump, who doesn't really take criticism lying down, and he just hasn't. In this Truth Social post, it's pretty expansive, but I'll give you some of the key quotes worth reiterating, I think. He says, "Think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start." He then goes on to say, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing that he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle, a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Now, on the issue of any Trump-brokered ceasefire, President Trump says, Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. So, dearie me, I mean, I'm not sure where that leaves us, because clearly we were heading down the road towards peace talks in which President Trump, America, would be the honest broker bringing these two sides together. But here you have Donald Trump now very bitter, I think, in some of the remarks that he's making about President Zelensky here. So I'm not sure where to go from it. I can't really call it as to just how things are going to progress from here, Martin.
Well, Mark White, if that's your response, and who can blame you, how do you imagine Volodymyr Zelensky feels? How do you reckon that the rest of the leaders of Europe feel? They've all been completely smashed to one side in one social media comment. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Mark White. And let's pull this now back to the studio. Our political editor, Chris Hope, has been going through this statement for the last hour. And, Chris, it's an absolute barrage. Where do you start? But something that really leaps out to me is this claim that on top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent him is missing. Now, there are a lot of people saying at the start of this war that Ukraine ranks very highly on the World Corruption League of Shame. Transparency International pointed out that fact. Huge sums of money, billions of dollars, could have gone missing. What are you taking away from this astonishing statement?
£350 billion sent by the US to Ukraine. It's just part of the war effort. Half that's gone missing, Trump says. That's extraordinary. I'm just reflecting on where this, I mean, with with Mark White, slightly agog at this, where this leaves the UK, Sir Keir Starmer. There was obviously the summit on Monday by European leaders. Starmer looked stronger there as a person to bridge Europe's relationship to the US about Ukraine. But will Starmer back this or not? There are two most senior officials.
He'll have no choice.
Well, I don't know.
Donald Trump has sidelined Zelensky.
Did Number 10 know about this? There were two senior officials for the two most senior people for Trump in the UK in Downing Street earlier, meeting with Jonathan Reynolds. Was anything mentioned about this? Because it leaves Starmer in a difficult position. Boris Johnson, another of the big cheerleaders for Zelensky, trying to be the Trump whisperer. He was there in the room for the inauguration of Trump. What will he say? I think it does leave a lot of politicians here with their trousers down, not sure what to do next.
Well, I mean, that's the impact that it certainly had. The Trump whisperer, Trump certainly didn't listen. Let's bring in my panel now. I'm joined by the senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and also the Labour commentator, Eve McQuillan. Welcome to the show, the pair of you. Eve, let's start with you. Where do you start with this? I mean, ostensibly, he's calling Zelensky a dictator, yet now the president of Ukraine doesn't even appear to have a seat at the negotiating table about the future of his own country.
Well, exactly. I mean, how does that square? Donald Trump can decide the future of Ukraine without asking the Ukrainian people. I think we need to drill into whether or not this 350 figure is in fact correct. And I think what I would say is actually this week, you know, I've been quite impressed by Keir Starmer trying to cast out on his own away from the US. We've seen him channeling a little bit of his Hugh Grant sensibilities, we all remember from Love Actually, pushing back against the US. and he could be potentially in a position where he's, leading Europe on this. We're seeing drawing away the US and the EU, but that's been happening for a while.
Do you see that happening? Do you see Britain... I don't see Britain having a role. I don't see anybody having a role in this here, apart from Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, by the looks of it. It's an astonishing thing to call Zelensky a dictator, ostensibly accuse him of corruption, and say, by the way, you're only a modestly successful comedian.
Yeah, and the danger, obviously, is from this, is that Trump will give Putin everything he wants. So if the whole thing is going to be a cave-in, we don't get a solution. It made sense when the Americans were saying, look, we'll have talks in Saudi Arabia, just see if the Russians are serious, then we'll start bringing others in, including Ukraine and Europe. Now it looks like they're going to try and do the deal between themselves, which would be incredibly serious, and it won't bring an end to a war. I mean, Zelensky has got to be in on the deal, otherwise we can't end this war.
OK, let's bring politics back domestically now, because another story we've been covering today on GB News is the hoo-ha between the MP Zara Sultana and Reform UK. Zara Sultana has defended her tweets protesting against Nigel Farage and Reform UK. You see that picture on your screen now. The former Labour MP, now an independent, she doubled down on that image where she put a line through Nigel Farage saying you're not welcome, ostensibly, in Birmingham for the party's rally on the 28th of March. GB News was pressing her for a comment all afternoon, and that came to GB News' political editor, Chris Hope, and she's doubled down. She's compared Nigel Farage to the far-right politics of the British National Party and the National Front ahead of that rally next month. She said, we stand for solutions and not scapegoats. Chris Hope, it's an astonishing statement, second one of the day. We expected perhaps a bit of humility from Zara Sultana. That never came. In fact, she's doubled down.
Well, we weren't sure what she meant by that symbol, the picture of a cartoon of Nigel Farage with a kind of no entry sign over his face and a date saying the 28th of the 3rd, 2025. And also, it's on screen now, you see there Birmingham, and she's saying, not welcome here, or words to that effect. Now, that's clearly what she feels, because a statement she's given to GB News in the past hour is extraordinary. As a born and bred Brummie, she says, whose parents suffered the violent consequences of far-right politics, I speak for many in this proud, multicultural city when I say we respect the politics of hatred and division. In my view, she says, based on her comments they've made publicly about Muslims and migrants, Reform UK is comparable to the National Front and the BNP. We pushed back against them before, and we'll do it again, and it goes on. It's very clear there that Zara Sultana sees Reform UK as the same on the screen now, you've seen the statement, the same as the BNP, the same as the party which Nigel Farage himself has rejected. You're seeing there, in my view, based on the comments that have been made about Muslims and migrants, Reform UK is comparable to the National Front and the BNP. We pushed hard against them before, and we'll do it again. And it goes on. Reform UK is a party bankrolled by billionaires and led by an ex-banker, public schoolboys. Its leader boasts of being the only politician in Britain keeping Thatcher's legacy alive. The same Thatcherism that decimated pit villages and post-industrial towns across the Midlands, leaving generational scars. Just finishing off now. Their MPs vote against workers while bending over backwards for the elites who fund them. Their relentless scapegoating of Muslims and migrants is nothing more than a cynical ploy to deflect from the real culprits, the powerful screwing over of our diverse working-class communities. And just finally, we stand for solutions, not scapegoats. And on March 28th, we'll make that clear. Well, any doubt what she meant is being dispelled by that statement. It's very, very clear what she means. There'll be some form of protest, some form of attempt to stop what Reform UK want to do on that day. Politics is meant to be peaceful. Zara Sultana knows that. She's an MP knowing that. This will make it more difficult. I think it does raise the tensions, what were already going to be maybe a difficult event to be held for Reform UK. It's got more difficult now.
And while we've been on air, I've been contacted by Rupert Lowe, of course, MP for Great Yarmouth for Reform, and he said this is awful, divisive and plain wrong. My full response is on the way to her.
And I should say it's now with the Speaker. It's now been given to the Speaker. He's going to refer it to the Speaker's security team who look at MP safety. They'll meet next week. Lee Anderson, the party's chief whip, who looks after all MPs in that five-strong caucus of Reform UK MPs, he says the appropriate action will be taken. And friends of his refer back to Leicester when there's some ugly scenes outside there at a rally last month.
Well, she's certainly doubled down. Let's bring back Nigel now and Eve. Nigel, I don't know about you. I don't think this helps. I think comparing any political party to the very worst, most divisive political parties of Britain's past isn't going to help the situation whatsoever. What say you?
I agree with that. No, I mean, she's quite wrong. You cannot compare Reform with the BNP or the National Front. I mean, they were completely different parties and dangerous. And I think that Reform is a proper political party. I'm not a supporter. I don't like Reform. I wouldn't vote for them. But that doesn't mean you make comparisons with BNP and National Front.
Eve, what say you on this? I mean, she's doubled down. Of course, it's a free country. We have free speech. She's allowed to say what she wants. She's allowed to turn up and protest on March 28th, no doubt, with a cohort of anti-racists. The trouble is now the stakes have just been set so much higher by bringing in such inflammatory language.
I mean, I think she's talking about pretty inflammatory issues, and I wouldn't say that Reform are the same as the BNP, but what I will say is they're an evolution of right-wing politics, and we should always remember that the far right isn't something that just exists in the corner away from the rest of our politics, that's insulated from the politics we have.
Do you think the Reform Party is far right?
I think the Reform Party is pretty far right on issues like immigration. Yeah.
What defines
because
far
I think
right?
the Reform Party sees immigration as the reason for a lot of our social problems, the reason for our problems in the NHS, the reason for our problems in housing. And the point that she's making about solutions, not scapegoats, I think that's actually right. And that capitalises Zara Sultani's ideology with respect to the Reform Party. She wants to talk to people about economic solutions to our problems rather than blaming migrants, and she sees Reform as blaming migrants. So she's called for a protest, which is what you should do in a democratic society.
A lot of people in Britain have grave concerns about the precise issues you just mentioned, about the housing crisis, about the fact you can't get a doctor's appointment, about the fact we spend billions of pounds on asylum while axing the winter fuel allowance. By the way, 66% of Labour voters would like to control our borders better. Are they far right?
I don't think anybody who has any concerns about immigration is far right. But when you put immigration front and centre of your politics, when you blame immigration for social issues, big, broad social issues that are issues with our economy, issues of funding our public services, how we support our ageing population, how we build enough homes.
You must admit it has an obvious impact. If you import 1 million people per year, it clearly has an impact on public services. It clearly has an impact on everything from traffic to your ability to be able to have a home. That's not racist or far right. It's a simple fact.
But it's not the only reason behind our housing crisis. So we've got a housing crisis because we've not built enough homes for generations. We've got issues with our NHS workforce because we haven't trained people, you know?
Nigel Nelson, this could precipitate, I fear, a confrontation on the 28th now. The battle line has been drawn. If you compare a party to the far right, if you turn up in numbers, just compare them to the British National Party or the National Front. Back to the point we had earlier at the top of the show, is this really the behaviour befitting of an elected Member of Parliament in Britain?
Well, we started with the tweet of the image that Zara put out. I found no problem with that. That was fine. My disagreement with her is over comparing Reform with BNP and National Front. However, that doesn't mean we're going to end up with a violent demonstration outside the Birmingham Arena on March the 28th.
Well, nobody wants that.
You will have a demonstration there. You'll have people protesting against Reform, which is their democratic right to go and do. That's fine. I don't think there's anything that Zara Sultana has done to suggest that Nigel Farage or any of the Reform MPs or any Reform members are at any greater risk than they might be at the moment.
I wonder if that's true. I want to finish with you, Chris, so quickly if we could. I think you know that this will smart Nigel Farage because he will maintain he's the more to get rid of the extremists like the BNP and the National Front than anybody else in British politics. And how would he react to this, do you reckon?
He'll be appalled. I mean, he does think that when UKIP wasn't really existing back in the noughties, the BNP, EDL was prominent in UK politics. There was an MEP, I think, for the BNP, who took taxpayers' money. All the support fell away when UKIP rose and became this space where people who were concerned about immigration but hated the BNP had somewhere to go. And that's why we don't really have, I would say, a far-right issue that they do have on the continent. We don't have it in this country in the same way. He'll be appalled by this because he thinks one of the things he never gets thanked for is killing off the BNP.
OK, well, the battle lines seem to have been drawn. This story is going to roll and roll. Thank you very much, Chris Hope, Ian McQuillan and also Nigel Nelson. Fantastic for your contributions. Thank you. Now, change of tone, because we're giving you 2 chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway, as we have 2 amazing prize bundles to be won. And here's all the details you need to enter.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along 2 very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady, joining us this morning. And then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on the Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
Look how gorgeous.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now
they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on
yawning already.
Here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background?
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are so laid back.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's
as long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities. And it's just great to see, even though some of them...
Duchess just perched on the back of your hair.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 5:28 on an incredibly busy news day. And before we move on, we've got a break-in line for you. Kemi Badenoch has reacted to Donald Trump's extraordinary social media post in which he attacked Volodymyr Zelensky. Chris Hope is still with us, our political editor. Chris Hope, what has Kemi Badenoch said?
Well, we posed a question moments ago in our chat about this. What do the UK politicians say about this? Well, Kemi Badenoch was the first out the trap. She says that President Zelensky is not a dictator. He's a democratically elected leader of Ukraine, who bravely stood up to Putin's illegal invasion. Under my leadership and under successive Conservative prime ministers, we have always and will stand with Ukraine. President Trump is right that Europe needs to pull its weight, and that includes the UK. We need to get serious, she says. The PM will have my support to increase defence spending. There's a fully funded plan to get to 2.5% sitting on his desk. That should be the bare minimum. Don't forget, Tory policy was to get to that figure. Labour haven't yet said how they're going to get there. Starmer should get on with it, get on a plane to Washington and show some leadership. We cannot afford to get this wrong. Now, she knows, and I know, that next week the PM flies to America to meet with Donald Trump, and that's the pressure that is going right now on Keir Starmer. What do you say? We know that the two senior diplomats representing America were in Number 10 earlier, speaking today with Jonathan Reynolds. We don't think with, well, we know not with the Prime Minister, we're told by aides to the PM. But what on earth and how do you respond to this? I've gone to Number 10. We'll bring you the response as soon as we can. But if you're Keir Starmer, whose side do you go on? Do you back Zelensky, as we have done for 3 years, say not dictator, or do you side with Trump and say and almost support that criticism? I doubt he'll do the latter.
Do you think the bigger question is, will Keir Starmer have any say whatsoever in this? I mean, he can support Volodymyr Zelensky all he likes. He can say he'd like to put troops on the ground in Ukraine all he likes. The Russians have said today they would not countenance that. And Donald Trump has just said Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator, and he's accusing him of saying that half of the money that the Americans sent is missing. I don't think Donald Trump is going to listen to anything Keir Starmer says. He's not listening to anything that Volodymyr Zelensky says.
It's moving at a dizzying pace. A week ago, Keir Starmer was on the edge of a dinner of EU leaders, the 27 leaders, or 2 weeks ago, the EU leaders, and feeling a bit excluded. He then went on Monday, didn't he, to this emergency summit. Suddenly, we looked like, the UK looked like we were going to be the bridge between the European Union and America over the future of Ukraine. And then fast forward 2 days, suddenly you've got here Donald Trump almost abandoning Zelensky diplomatically, who's now stuck in Turkey on his own, nowhere near Saudi Arabia, where the talks are taking place. And where does that leave Keir Starmer? He looked to me a few hours ago as in quite a strong position. He was going to go to America next week and be this kind of bridge building, this person connecting the EU trading bloc with the US over Ukraine. Well, what's he say? What's he do? Right now, his team are probably looking at a statement and working out what to say to avoid offending Trump and somehow backing Zelensky.
Monday is the 3rd anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine. For 3 years, the liberal elites, the political leaders of the Western world, have all fallen into line with their unbridled support for Volodymyr Zelensky. At a stroke, that's been turned to matchwood by President Donald Trump. Have we ever seen anything like this in political history? And as far as a US president being this strong-armed and just kicking everybody else away from the table?
No, he's literally just taking the legs off the table, as you describe it. I would push back against you saying liberal elites. I think Brits backed Ukraine for the past 3 years. The country has fallen behind the attempt by Ukraine. We understand the issue of sovereign territory. Russia invaded. Ukraine fought back bravely with our support. I think that has been not a liberal or a Tory issue, an issue which we all got behind.
Western liberal political leaders, they're all... Come on.
Yeah, OK.
So Western liberal political leaders have been in lockstep behind Volodymyr Zelensky, and suddenly whatever they think, it seems to be outside of the tent, and the tent is being led by that new sheriff in town. It's an incredible...
It's extraordinary. And we'll bring you the Number 10 reaction as soon as we get it on this show.
OK, thank you very much, Chris Hope. What a day in world politics. Incredible. Now, there's loads more still to come, in fact. Between now and 6 o'clock, we'll be crossing live to Wethersfield, a village which has a population of just over 700 people, and it's about to be increased by 800 asylum seekers. More asylum seekers than locals in Wethersfield. I'll speak to a councillor next. But first, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you from the GB newsroom at 5:33. At the top story tonight, Donald Trump has launched a scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a dictator who he says has done a terrible job and shattered his country. In a post this afternoon on Truth Social, the US president suggested Zelensky was prolonging the war to keep the so-called gravy train of support flowing. Trump also claimed that he alone could negotiate an end to the war, saying his predecessor, Joe Biden, never tried, and that Europe has failed to bring peace. Well, as we were just hearing from our political editor, Chris Hope, in the last few minutes, Kemi Badenoch has hit back at Donald Trump's comments. She is defending President Zelensky in a post on X, saying that Ukraine has democratically elected him. He is not a dictator. The Conservative leader also praised Zelensky's leadership against Putin's invasion, reiterating that the UK will, she says, always stand with Ukraine. She did agree with Trump that Europe, including the UK, must do more, though, and is urging the Prime Minister to increase defence spending. In other news, UK inflation has jumped today to 3%, the fastest rise in 3 months, driven by soaring food prices, airfares and private school fees. And with energy, water and council tax bills also set to rise in April, households are bracing for more pressure on budgets. Meanwhile, businesses say higher wages and national insurance hikes could push prices up even further. And the government's warning the road to low inflation will be bumpy, while political parties are trading blame over tax and spending policies. A builder who murdered his wife and stepson after refusing to accept their divorce has been jailed for life with a minimum of 34 years. Calogero Ricotta stabbed his wife to death at their Essex home before killing her son as he tried to protect her. A judge called Ricotta controlling and coercive and said his vanity, his pride and ego led to the murders. Well, officers were at that scene within just minutes where he was quickly arrested.
Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Get on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands behind your head. Hands behind your head. Don't move. Don't move. You're under arrest on suspicion of attempt.
The BBC is under fire over claims it aired Hamas propaganda in a new Gaza documentary. It's accused of featuring a child narrator, Abdullah, without disclosing that he is the son of a Hamas minister and the grandson of a founding member. The programme, Gaza How to Survive a War Zone, aired on Monday, showing the conflict through the eyes of 3 children. Critics, though, say it raises serious questions about bias, but the broadcaster insists the film does follow its editorial guidelines. And Italy's Prime Minister has visited Pope Francis in hospital where he's being treated for pneumonia. The 88-year-old was admitted to hospital in Rome on Friday with a respiratory infection. Giorgia Meloni said she found him alert and responsive, adding they joked as always and praised his sense of humour. But his weekend engagements have been cancelled, with tests showing what officials call a complex picture of his condition. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for a full roundup with the 6 o'clock news, and Martin will be straight back with you.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems in the outskirts of Birmingham to the south of the city centre for the A441. The Pershore Road at Edgbaston, it's closed at the scene of an accident off Pebble Mill Road. Moving into Lincolnshire further east, just northwest of Skegness, the A158, the Borough Road, shut after a water main burst in Lincoln Road and Borough Old Road. Long delays on the Surrey stretch of the M25 continue heading anti-clockwise. The motorway is down to a single lane from junction 10 to 9 from the A3 and Leatherhead. Recovery works underway following an accident. A trailer was involved that detached from a car. And in central London, Vauxhall Bridge is closed southbound. There's been an accident and a spillage causing long queues back to Victoria Station and back along Millbank towards Chelsea Bridge as you divert. And sailings are cancelled on the Orkney Islands between Pirrawell and Papa Westray. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, loads and loads of you have been getting in touch about the stories today. One thing that's really got you going is that extraordinary statement by Zara Sultana. We've been covering this story throughout the show. Initially, Miss Sultana posted a picture of Nigel Farage with a line through it, a no entry sign, ostensibly saying that Reform UK were not welcome in Birmingham. She's an MP for Coventry South. Of course, Birmingham isn't Coventry, but it is next door. And there's the picture she put up, and GB News put a comment to her saying, would you like to write to reply about this, because Reform were not happy at all. The Zia Yousef, the party's chairman, saying this was disgraceful. She then replied by saying, in my view, based on the comments they have made publicly about Muslims and migrants, Reform UK is comparable to the National Front and to the BNP. She then went on to say that Reform UK were not welcome in Birmingham. She said, as a born and bred Brummie whose parents suffered the violent consequences of far-right politics, I speak for many in this proud multicultural city when I say we reject the politics of hatred and division. Well, I've been contacted by a GB News viewer called Jackie, who says this regarding Zara Sultana: I am also a Brummie born and I'm also proud of it. Well, how dare she say that Reform are not welcome in Birmingham? By the way, I'm not a Reform UK supporter, but she does not speak for me or many other Brummies. We are a free and open and democratic society where anybody should be allowed their point of view. By her comments, she is inciting trouble, in my opinion. Shame on her. And she is making and creating division, not solving it. Jackie, I think you speak for a lot of people when you say that. And a comment, by the way, has just gone out from Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe, of course, is the Reform UK parliamentarian for Great Yarmouth. He's in these past few moments posted on X. He said this in response to Zara Sultana: at Reform, we are everything you are not. Patriotic, decent, civil. We are in Parliament to represent our constituents and our country. You should try it occasionally. You might enjoy it. Please do remember, you're the MP for Coventry, not Gaza. Why don't you act like it? Well, there we go. The fur is flying. Now, moving on, is the hairdressing industry on the brink? Well, salon owners say Rachel Reeves's budget is the final nail in the coffin, with tax hikes and rising wages making it impossible to stay afloat. Now, with job losses looming and no new apprentices by 2027, is this another blow for British businesses struggling to survive? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by the award-winning hairdresser Michael Van Clark. Michael, pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you for joining us. We've heard from the farming industry, from hospitality, from so many industries, the pinch You've been placed under by this budget. Tell us how bad it is for the hairdressing industry.
Well, we noticed the change a few weeks before the election last year. So mid-June, we had a sudden drop-off in trade. And June is a peak year for us, so this was very unusual. About 8 or 9% of a drop-off in turnover, which is a lot to deal with. And frankly, it's got worse since, because the budget was another nail in the coffin. And, you know, we're at the sharp end of society. We get to hear what people are feeling. You know, we have clients that are leaving the country. We have clients that are selling up their businesses. They don't want to work in this environment. And it's something that we've had to rethink in terms of the costs of our apprentices. And we have a good history of training people, not just young school leavers, but older people, 21 and plus, even in their 30s, that are coming back to work. And looking at the double whammy of minimum wage and the national insurance hike, we're looking at something like now a 21-year-old costing about 38,000 in take-ins for them to end up with 22,000. That other 16,000 is a hit going to the Treasury. And business is going to reshape themselves, and it's really going to deprive a lot of these people from the opportunity to engage in their first step of the ladder of a career.
And it's obviously going to have two effects. Either you cut back on your staff training, your staff retention, your staff hiring, or you've got to put prices up. And when you start putting prices up, of course, people are feeling the pinch themselves. No doubt many of the customers are telling you that.
That's right. And, you know, there's only so much people are prepared to pay in a free market. But I don't know, the government just seems to think that they can keep taking from business and somehow people will just keep paying. It doesn't work like that. You know, there's a limit to what people are prepared to pay.
And how many salons do we think nationwide are going to have to shut up shop?
Well, I think it could end up with 10% of the industry closing down. I mean, certainly at the upper end, you know, there's a little bit more latitude, but you know, you also have businesses that are very established. They need staff, and like with retail, hospitality, these are entry-level jobs for people. And if you deprive them of that opportunity, they will lay idle or go on benefits. And I think that's the short-sightedness of the government, not to see that this is a step into the world of work.
Thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your expertise, and wish you the best of luck in your industry. Thank you very much. That's the award-winning hairdresser Michael Van Clark. An absolute pleasure to have you in the studio, sir. Thank you. Now, moving on, if you are in search of some winter sun this year, and who can blame you, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Winds from the north will bring a real chill to Greece and Turkey over the next few days. Meanwhile, plenty of sunny skies in Spain. There's that northerly wind making many of the Greek islands colder than the UK. Certainly chillier across parts of Croatia. Some sunny spells in Italy, along with a few showers. Fine and sunny weather for the Balearics and southern Spain, along with the Canaries. And the breeze here will be easing. But that cold wind will continue to blow across the Greek islands into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather has changed. It's turning milder, but it's also turning quite blustery. The wind's going to get stronger over the next few days. We'll all see further spells of rain, all thanks to low pressure systems and weather fronts. Look at them all lining up out in the Atlantic, finally pushing away the high pressure that's brought most of us a pretty dry February so far. But it's going to be far from dry tonight. Patchy rain here and there, but many eastern areas dry this evening. But look at that rain spreading its way in. Some of that rain on the heavy side too. A lot of cloud around, and the winds continuing to strengthen. Quite chilly this evening across parts of the east, but these are the temperatures by morning, 7 or 8 degrees above freezing in some parts of the south and the west. start Thursday in double digits, but also start pretty drab, fairly blustery with further outbreaks of rain to come. It's going to be a grey day across much of Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy across the north initially, but further pulses of heavier rain coming into the southwest and a pretty wet start for Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain here for the morning rush hour. Outbreaks of rain too across Wales and southwest England. Parts of eastern England having a dry start, but again, don't expect it to last. The breeze continuing to strengthen, getting really quite windy in western areas as this next band of rain works in across northern England, North Wales, covering Scotland. Should turn a bit brighter in southern Scotland, Northern Ireland for a time, but then more showers come in during the afternoon. Wales, southwest England, northwest England also looking a bit brighter to end the day. We're all looking milder. Look at the temperatures. Double digits across the board. Some places getting into the teens. We might even squeak up to 15 or even 16 Celsius. Still a few heavy showers around across northeast England and Scotland on Thursday evening, but many places becoming dry for a time. But behind me, there's more wet weather moving in, and that means further spells of wet weather for Friday and through the weekend. Also looking pretty gusty at times as well.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, an astonishing report, according to Facts for EU, immigrants from the European Union are responsible for an astonishing 2/3 of the UK's population growth since 2003. Now, the think tank also claims that 8.2 million settlement applications have been processed in the UK under the EU settlement scheme. It's mind-bending numbers, and to talk us through them now, I'm joined by the chairman of Facts for EU, Lee Evans. Lee, welcome to the show. Another fantastic report from Facts for EU, and the numbers are simply mind-boggling. Tell us about the top-line number. In over 20 years, how many people came from the European Union?
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary stuff, Martin. We interrogated the Home Office data over several weeks to produce a series of 4 reports. This is the first one. Pleased to tell you that GB News is getting the exclusive on them all. This one, very quickly, is about the applications to the EU settlement scheme. The scheme was agreed by Theresa May and her senior civil servant, Ollie Robbins, at the time. And that chart shows you there that if you look at the total increase in population over the 20 years, from 2003 to 2023, 8.6 million was the total, but of that, 66% is down to the EU settlement scheme. That is how many people have actually been accepted so far under this scheme.
And Lee,
so
that's
that also 5.7 million out of the 8.6.
And Lee, we have to rattle through. We only have a couple of minutes left. We've got a second graphic now, which goes into some more detail, which points the finger at the primary countries responsible for this drive. And I'm seeing there, Lee Evans, a lot of countries that Tony Blair opened the door to, the G8 nations. Tell us more.
Yeah, look at Romania. I'll give you a pretty amazing statistic, Martin, and that is that in 2004, Romania's population was 21.6 million. It dropped by 2.4 million in 20 years. 75% of that is accounted for by the 1.8 million applications from Romanians. But whilst the UK's population has been rising dramatically, some of these other countries like Romania and Poland have been falling. And if you look at those numbers, 1.8 million applications from Romania, 1.3 from Poland. You mentioned Tony Blair. Back in 2003, he was telling people, based on a Home Office report that we have a copy of, that there would be between 5 and 13,000 per year. Between 5 and 13,000 a year as a result of opening the doors.
OK, Lee, I'm going to quickly interject again. We've got a final chart to put up here, and this shows us how long it took to take back control of our borders. Astonishing. Look, going back from 2019, it took 5.5 years after Brexit for us finally to take back control of our borders. They're a spectacular failure of Brexit.
Yeah, well, the application of Brexit by government, for sure. And we'll be coming back to this, Martin, I'm sure, in a future broadcast. There's a lot more to say about it. And if you look at the information from the government chief inspector of borders and immigration, I can give you quotes on that that will make your mind boggle. So, yes, I will say one thing about the Home Office. They come in for a lot of criticism. On this, they dealt with a massive 8.2 million applications.
OK, Lee, we have to leave it there. We're running out of time. But look, we're going to get you back on to go through the other part of that fantastic report. Thank you, Lee Evans. Now, up next is Jubes & Co. Now, I'm back at 7. I'm standing in for Farage. So see you then. Have a fantastic evening until then. And now, here is your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's turned milder and it's going to be very mild through tomorrow, but it won't feel as mild because it'll be quite breezy and yes, there's quite a bit of rain to come as well. There's a lot of weather fronts ganging up out in the Atlantic. They're moving in. The isobars are squeezing together, telling us the winds are picking up. Band of heavy rain crossing Scotland this evening. Northern England seeing some heavy downpours too. Might even hear a crack of thunder here and there. Just generally staying cloudy with outbreaks of rain on and off through the night. That breeze, the cloud, all helping to keep the temperatures up. A much milder night than we've had by morning. Temperatures 7 or 8 degrees in the east, double figures further south and west. But as I said, it won't necessarily feel that mild because it's going to be cloudy and for many a wet start to the day. That rain on and off across northern Scotland, but some drier spells. Another pulse of heavier rain coming into southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. It could be a very wet start to the morning rush hour here. There'll be some heavier outbreaks of rain too, crossing western England and Wales. Parts of eastern England, generally dry but fairly drab. But as I say, you'll notice that jump in temperatures compared to recent mornings. Some of that showery rain will work its way into eastern England. Heavier pulses of rain, the brighter colours there across northern England, parts of Wales. Northern Ireland cheering up for a time, but then more showers come in here later on. Wales, western parts of